Yeah, I almost forgot to play the intro there. Everybody loves the intro, so that's the whole show, the intro. The rest of it falls after the intro is just basically whatever gee-dunk kind of stuff. But yeah, the whole
I'm
point was
just
I do the
glad I
intro.
wasn't picking my nose.
Yeah, you flashed on the screen for a second, so that could have been really bad. Many
close.
things could have happened in those 2 seconds.
That was close.
So yeah, good thing. Anyways, morning everybody. It is Caffeine Corner. I am drinking caffeine. I'm not having as much as I did yesterday because God, did I have a massive caffeine headache. Oh my God, I was dying last night. I mean, just, you know, that kind of screaming, pounding headache that you just can't get rid of. I took out 2 ibuprofen and went to sleep, and it alleviated it. But yeah, I was not a happy camper yesterday. So
no.
I'm not going to drink that much caffeine. I drink a lot of caffeine. Well, because I've been drinking coffee all day, and then my daughter came over, and I was having coffee with her. Not that she was drinking coffee, but only because she doesn't like coffee. But yeah. How are you, Chesh?
Yeah, I'm okay. I drank what am I on? I switched over to Earl Grey in the morning, so there's a little bit less caffeine going on, and things are a little bit more chill. And
yeah,
I've got a regular Orange Pico now.
I like Orange Pico. I prefer more of a like sleepy time tea. I like there's this any kind of the herbal type teas I really like. I do have an Earl Grey type, and I have a black tea, and I've got some green teas. So I do have a lot of packets of teas, but I have those usually at night. I'll just have like one cup in my smug of tea, and that kind of soothes me a little bit because there's no caffeine in any of them. Well, black tea I think has a little bit of caffeine.
No, you just get to steep in your own arrogance.
Exactly. This is see this is like I literally can just steep in smugness. You know, see that? That's coffee Jesus. That's mainly coffee Jesus right there.
Coffee Jesus. Yeah, Steve's calling himself Jesus.
Well, you reach a certain point, yeah, narcissist according to some people. But anyways, today we got something kind of a little bit different, a little bit, well, not usually our usual format. Let me give a quick background story on this. So, people may know who David Silverman is. He's a firebrand atheist. I've known David for a very long time. Don't agree with him on pretty much anything, but I happen to get along with the guy. And he made a video on Covfefe 19.
Wait. You disagree and he disagrees with you, but you
strange
get along?
I don't understand the phenomenon either. It shouldn't be. It's against the laws of nature, or at least the laws of the a-holy Pope of Gnosticism, but it is what it is. But he made a video and he tagged me and David Smalley and a few other people on it, and he wanted us to kind of review it. Now, I'll be honest, and I'm sure Dave will probably check this out at some point. I haven't watched this video, David. I'm sorry. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I knew I'd be reviewing it at some point, but I wanted to do it in live real time, but I also wanted to have at least an expert come in and review it with me and of course Cheshire.
Get Steve's live real time.
So this is my live reaction. I've not watched this. I've had it pinned for ages, but I have not seen it yet. It's about 24 minutes long, and we have an actual expert on this topic because again, I'm not an expert in the medical field, and I never will claim to be. I know a little bit about little things, but I wanted somebody who actually could do an actual breakdown of this video. Now,
the only thing Steve is an expert on was frauding Medi-Cal.
Yeah, got that down in art form, right? I even got my medical card. Strange how that happens, right? I mean, somebody commits fraud and you still have a medical card, and okay, whatever works.
How to get away with it is by not doing it.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah. Remember, who is without sin cast the first stone? Let who without sin cast first stone. So people, I've noticed, like almost 95% of the time, when somebody accuses somebody else, they're doing this, right?
95%.
95% of the time. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, 600 days, people, 600 days it's been. Do you believe that? That is a long freaking time. That is 600 days since Kyle promised to pay me. That's 600 days since Mr. Atheist had said that I would get paid. That's 600 days since Godless Engineer and Caitlin Chloe and Shannon and everybody else said I was going to get my money. And guess what? How much have I seen so much? How much have I gotten?
You still got me kind of wide.
I do have you wide. I can't fix it. I don't know what it is. I tried to play with it. If it, it just fills you out. That's all. This gives you some shape. That's all. But yeah, I noticed you. It's because of Google Meets, man. I'm actually, mine is not Meets. It's actually my camera. So it's actually 16:9. Yours is Meets, and I've got to like stretch and crop and move and yeah. So Anyway, so I do have an expert coming in. Matter of fact, Cheshire is going to introduce them and kind of go from there.
So we've got Nurse Dubs with us today, and I'm happy that she was confident enough to come and join us because, this isn't something that, everybody is okay with doing and having these kinds of conversations, especially when they can be really, really frustrating when they affect your field. And so sometimes you don't want to even give them credence by having the conversation. But I think David was at least questioning enough to make he wasn't doing too much declaring or preaching or saying this or that. He was a lot of his video I think is more not understanding and asking questions, and I thought that Nurse Dubs would be able to help us out. So hello, how are you?
Hello, everybody. This is Nurse Dubs here. I'm really excited to be on Caffeine Corner today. I definitely feel right at home. I got a little bit of the caffeine jitters, so I feel like it's appropriate today to be on here. I'm not sure if it's always the caffeine jitters or just a little bit of nervousness, but for sure excited to be here and provide a little bit of my educational background as some opinion towards this video, as well as hopefully be a little bit informing for everybody as well who is not working in this field.
And you've already, I'll tell people, she's already looked at the video. She's already had to have fastidious notes, one understand. I'm assuming she's worked with Covfefe, I'm just going to call it Covfefe patients. You don't have to say. It's just, the algorithm of YouTube hates the word COVID. It just hates it for
Covfefe.
So we just say Covfefe.
It's
more of a slight against YouTube, just because I don't. I'm just because YouTube has tried to minimize bad videos, and I get that, right? They don't want misinformation out there. Totally understand that, but they have fucked up doing it so badly that they're actually taking out videos that are actually putting out correct information, exposing the bad information, and that's a problem.
And that's the thing, right, is I appreciate being thought of as an expert, but unfortunately with this COVID, it is definitely something of a bigger topic that I'm not sure anybody can be an expert on just yet with the short time that it's been in the world, but definitely have some clinical experience as well as some personal experience with COVID that I would be happy to touch on.
Well, that's perfect because you're way ahead of the game compared to us. I assure you. I've been isolated for a year now, yeah, it's been rough. I think
the main thing that I think David Silverman wasn't understanding, and I don't actually dislike David Silverman either. I want to make that clear. I have every intention of giving him a hard time throughout this video. It is not malicious. I don't really have any problems with the guy. I think he's a funny guy. He doesn't seem like he's trying to cause harm ever. I don't think I've ever seen him actively going out of his way to try and
he's a button pusher. He likes to push. He likes to push people's buttons. He likes to see what the line is. He likes to see how far he can push things. And I think that a lot of times he has gotten screwed over it. I think there's been a lot of shitty allegations against him that came out later that were not true. Go figure. But yeah, I think that's his style. That's his brand. That's why he's a firebrand. And I don't have a problem with that. That's him. That's him.
He's the kind of person that the language police go after. You said this word, you're not allowed saying this word. Wee woo, no fun here.
Yeah, that's something. Again, he and I do agree a lot when it comes to we don't believe in word policing. We don't believe in telling people what you can and cannot say, how to use words. It's just it's ridiculous. But he has been targeted because of that. I've been targeted because of that. We've all had some kind of targeted because of that.
Quite honestly, from what I can tell, it seems more to me that he's been targeted because of utilizing that, but he's been targeted for other reasons.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
The motives weren't actually altruistic language policing.
Yeah, I don't think that people have gone out with him with real intent to have anything but drama. But I know that all too well when it comes to the internet. People have to fabricate drama for views or just to get attention. That's what they do, unfortunately. But anyway, so we're going to dive into this. Before we start, Dubs, I'm just going to call you Dubs.
Hey, that works.
Do you want to give a 10-second?
Steve is being disrespectful to our guest.
It's not even a real name, Dubs is. I'm
not
sure.
At all.
Yeah,
I'm shy with the microphone anyways, so. So I've been nursing for just about 2 years now. I graduated from Western University in Southern Ontario with a bachelor's degree as a registered nurse. And I'm currently working in transplant, which is an incredible unit, and I absolutely love it there.
That's awesome. Well, we
Yeah.
appreciate, first let me say we appreciate all you do. I know firsthand, RNs have it shitty. They do a lot of work for little pay. I got to tell you, when my dad passed, the nurse there was a huge asset. I mean, she was just incredible. And we people notice these things. People remember things like that, especially when they have people in a hospital. It's scary. And if they have a good nurse, they remember these things. And my mom always remembered this. I think she still sends the nurse cards. Well, she was for a while. So yeah, it makes a difference, and so I think that nurses are highly underappreciated. So let me get that out there.
All of the footwork, all of the footwork for maintaining morale, and that is so important and underappreciated.
Absolutely.
We do appreciate when we do get recognized for those things, and we're working hard to change how we're viewed, definitely in society, and how our work is being changed throughout the years, and just the amount of information that we can provide to people and the amount of work that we do in order to provide that information is sometimes overlooked.
Absolutely.
Dubs, I think that's what you were saying about this video is a matter of education and a matter of perspective, right? Not necessarily a matter of maliciousness or too much like opinionated or political, because I think that's what you were getting at before.
Yeah, of course. I mean, my experience with this situation is totally different from another nurse's perspective of it as well. And so just having my opinion here is not necessarily the full story behind what is going on in these hospitals, but it definitely gives you a good look at some of the things that get missed when it comes to hospital politics and the way things actually run in a hospital.
Or how somebody could take that not understanding how a hospital functions and seeing one thing, and because they don't have this information are able to run with it and kind of turn it into some kind of conspiracy. Not that I think that's what David's doing, but in general.
I think just at my first looks of it, I think a lot of it is genuine naive, just being genuinely naive about the situation and how sometimes things get handled, right? And it's a lack of misinformation that he's maybe gathered for himself, right?
Mm-hmm. So before we start, I want to ask real quick, what's your favorite medical show? Because I've watched them all. I love The Resident. I love Chicago MD, The Good Doctor.
Cells at Work.
Steve doesn't know. It's funny because I really like all these shows, and a lot of people like to critique the medical shows. I really do like Chicago MD.
It's really good, isn't it?
It is very good. It's somewhat accurate. Other shows like Good Doctor, Grey's Anatomy, they're all very good, but a lot of information is missed. And I think they're starting to get better in terms of the writing process for sure. And having medical professionals on to make sure that they're filming and within their script has better information. But
I do notice they all share stories. Like you'll find some rare disease, and one show will have it, and the next show will have the same rare disease, right? And so you already play it. I've already made the diagnosis. I'm not even a doctor. I can tell you what he has because I watched it on some other episode of some other show.
I wonder how many professionals that they pull on, or what the odds are that they've pulled on the same professionals to talk to. So when they ask for, hey, we need a rare disease, what would you recommend? And they're recommending the same disease to all the shows because they're just only talking to one person.
Oh, probably.
Yeah, every show, every medical show at least has to have an episode on necrotitis fasciitis, MRSA. I mean, every one of them has to have certain things.
Lupus.
Exactly. Lupus, ringworm, All right. So, anyways, let's dive into this. Hopefully, you guys can hear it. I think I've got it all set up right. I'm gonna start playing it. You guys let me know if you can hear it inside, and then the outside if they can hear it. I'm just gonna kind of let it play, and then I'm gonna have Nurse Dubs just say stop when just something she wants to say, or when we want to say. Like I said, this is new to me, so I'm probably gonna be the least talkative here for a change.
No, Steve is gonna be pausing every 30 seconds because he's gonna be like, wait, what?
No, really? No, really?
We already watched this. Steve hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah, I'm going blind, straight up. Yeah, totally blind.
Watch for Steve's reaction.
that I've written down as well, and I feel like I don't want to stop it completely, but there are a lot of things that we will be stopping for just to briefly discuss for sure.
All right, so at the very least, we probably shouldn't play more than a minute, because then it's too much at a time, or a minute or two. So I don't want to go too long. But here we go.
He's got a cool intro. I'll give him that.
It's a cool intro.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'm
Hi.
doing this video in response to some responses to my tweets about my thoughts on COVID and my thoughts on mask wearing. And I got some challenges on some of my opinions. My general challenge is that my general opinion is I'm not seeing it. I am not threatened by COVID at all. I am not afraid of it. I am opposed to any lockdowns. I'm opposed to mask mandates. I think anybody who wants to wear a mask can wear a mask. Anybody who doesn't want to get near somebody who's not wearing a mask cannot get near somebody who's not wearing a mask. But the short story is, I believe that we are in a position now where we are much more survivable, and we are much more able to isolate the vulnerable.
I know it's quiet. I have it boosted at 30 gain. That's literally the loudest I can make it for some reason, and I don't know why.
That's sad.
Yeah.
So I think pretty much everyone will be on the same page that nobody's going to tell David Silverman how he should and should not feel. If he doesn't feel threatened, if he's not afraid of the virus, that's fine. I don't think he's required to be.
Well,
No, not anymore.
Yeah, I don't think we should be afraid, but people, there's inherent fear things that because people do fear things, they should take precautions. I mean, so it is a kind of a protective thing. If you fear something, that's a survival mechanism, right? So
yeah.
I've got a 30% gain, so I don't know. Maybe I'll drop that down because I don't think it's making that much difference. But yeah, the outside is going to have to turn it up, I guess, when he's on, because I don't know why it's not
Turn
very
all
loud.
of us down.
Well, it's not boosting him up as it should. And I don't know why.
Is there an internal one inside of Meets?
Well, see, when I boosted up to 30 gain, it boosted you guys up. It didn't boost the video.
Oh, yeah, that's the wrong thing.
Yeah, and I don't know why. That was odd. It boosted you guys, but it didn't boost the video. So it's as loud as it's going to go. There's nothing I can do about it. All right, so let's continue on.
And that we should do that, and that everything else should open up. And if we don't do that, we're going to kill ourselves. And I'm going to make that case in this video because, what do you get from Twitter, right? What do you get from your echo chamber? You don't get much. I try to keep my Twitterverse broad so that I see the breadth of things. But let me just show you where. But I just don't think people are looking at this whole picture. I just don't think people are looking at everything here. And I'm sure I'm not looking at everything. I'm just a guy, right? I'm not a doctor. I have no medical experience at all. I'm just going to give you my views, and you can tell me I'm wrong. And shout out to Emery and Steve McRae.
Oh, I got a shout out. Oh, thank you, Dave. I haven't seen this. Thank you, Dave. I got a shout out.
He's relying on you to tell him he's wrong.
Yeah, he anticipated the video.
I will say this though. Look, I don't have a problem with people giving uninformed opinions. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have a problem with people giving completely uninformed opinions. I mean, lay people are allowed to give their opinions. I do it all the time. I'm a layperson. That's all I do is I give my opinion sometimes, but I do base it on something, right? So I have no problem with him weighing in on certain things, even this topic. I would hope that that you do your due diligence, you get an informed perspective, and you go from there. But you're bound to make some mistakes, and that's why you generally check your work with some expert, or you have an expert come on like we're doing now. But I don't have a problem with him saying, "Look, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm giving my opinion on it." Do you guys have any issue with that?
I don't have any issue on that. I mean, he's being upfront and honest that he is kind of in a situation where he feels that this is how things are with COVID, and he definitely has the right to his opinion. I think there's implications with society in general having that same mentality, but we can discuss it, I guess, a little bit later on after he's made a couple of those points.
All right, sounds good to me.
I think that he I have no problem with this. This is a matter of context, right? He is presenting in a way where he's very clear about what he's presenting and how he's presenting it. He's like, listen, I'm a layman. This is how I feel about it. This is what I've been able to look up. And so here's my opinions on the information I've been able to find. Now, whether he's come to the right or wrong conclusion could be an issue with how he's doing his research, or it could be an issue with who he's been able to have access to, what resources he's got, or it could be an issue with how information is even being presented depending on where you live in the world. So the like information that you get in the UK in your day-to-day is going to be different than what you get in Canada and what you get in the United States versus what you get in China versus what you get in Japan. Like, so depending on how this information is even being presented to the public, especially when you've got like so many just conspiracy theorists in Congress, right, in like American politics right now, you're going to end up, especially since a lot of it is anti-science, it makes it very easy for people with otherwise good intentions to come to the wrong conclusions because they're not given the information. They don't have ready access to the information that they should have access to.
I agree. And I hate to say it, and because I am an American, but I am convinced Americans, when it comes to STEM, are probably not the leaders of the free world. Let's just put it that way. If you took an average, I think the average American is probably not as sharp as some of the other countries. And I think the other countries' educational system requires them to learn a lot more than our educational system does. That's just from what I've seen. Call that subjective because it completely is, but it just seems that way.
Yeah, he's not trying to, it doesn't seem to me that he's trying to convince anybody. It just seems like he's trying to convince, this is what I think about it, and here's why I think this way.
Yeah, he's not, there's a difference between somebody saying, look, this is my positions, or this is my belief, this is my self-assessment, these are my what's called autobiographical beliefs, that's fine. Or saying, hey, look, this is an actual fact, it's an objective fact. Don't confuse objective facts with subjective facts, because that's what people do, and it just drives me nuts.
He's also invited people to comment.
Yes, I love that.
He's also inviting people to tell him he's wrong, but he's not saying, hey, listen, don't just tell me I'm wrong and
show me.
That's it. No. Please show me what you're talking about so I can understand better, so you can maybe understand me better, so that way we can each actually have a conversation.
That's why we have her.
Right. Hello. Or you end up with somebody like a flat earther who's they have an agenda. They're trying to push something. They're not trying to, there's no conversation to be had there a lot of the time.
And probably David C. Smalley, who will probably have responses for this.
David's doing a response. I've talked to David Smalley on it.
I'm going to start with preliminary death statistics, okay? In 2019, about 2.85 million people died, okay? That is on a spreadsheet that I've made. 2.8 million people died. I'll show you the spreadsheet in a second. Is about 0.87% of the population. We lose that every year. We grow by about 0.5% of the population, and we die apparently by about 0.87% of the population. So let's talk about how many people are dying by COVID.
So can we pause for a second real quick?
Yeah, this is already where I'm like, oh, this misuse of statistics is going to kill us.
I just want to say that the statistics part of it, I get where he's trying to explain it, but he very much lost me in this next couple of minutes.
It's starting here and it's going to go. I have a feeling because right now he's relating facts, right? That is from the date that this was made. That's the number, right?
There's already a problem with the presentation, and that it has to do with this is the number of people that die every year. About it's like, yeah, but this is an additional this many. So if you have an average of this many people dying, and then you say, and this many people died from Covfefe, that's on top of the number. That's not part of this number. That's only COVID stuff. So now you've doubled the number. If this many people die every year, you've doubled that number.
I don't think he said. Did he say how many people die a year?
Yeah, he said this is the number of COVID deaths. This is how many people die a year.
Okay.
I believe I think he was saying there was an extra 240,000 some odd deaths, according to the statistics that he has pulled.
Yeah. It's possible that he misspoke and he meant this is the number of people that died from COVID that year.
Yeah.
If that's what he meant, then that's fine. But if what he meant,
that's how I read it, but I interpreted it. But maybe I misheard him.
What I heard was this is the number of people who've died from COVID, and this is the number of people we lose that many people a year.
Okay.
And so that is equating these two numbers. But what that actually does is double that.
big
Right, because
thing.
if you're saying it's not, if you say 1,000 people die every year, and then you say, and 1,000 people have died from COVID, that's 2,000 people, right?
If that's what he's saying, I don't know if
If that's
that's
what
what
he's
it is.
saying, that might just, I might be misunderstanding what he's trying to say, but that caught me. That I caught that, and I was like, maybe he just misspoke. But
Let's see where he goes with it.
Right? Because we are hearing a whole bunch of reports on all the sides of doctors being told to add COVID even when there's not COVID. We've heard reports of, COVID being a comorbidity being about 94%. And that can mean one of two things. That can mean that they were reasonably healthy, but COVID came on and kicked them so hard that it killed them. Or it could also mean that they were teetering on death and COVID was a light thing and it killed them. We have no idea in those numbers. We have no idea of what percentage is what numbers. We know that 94% of COVID has some sort of comorbidity. 94% of COVID deaths have some sort of comorbidity. 4%, that's 14,400 died with COVID alone. Just to give you an idea, I'll bring this over now. So just to give you an idea, we have 240,000 incremental deaths. Let me show you why I got that number. Because the numbers are all over the place. We don't know if a death is COVID or not. Okay, we have to, because there were so many possibilities out there of false COVID things, and we don't know how many of those COVID deaths are COVID primary.
All right, let's pause it right there real quick.
I was just gonna say that's a good spot to pause it for.
All right, so walk us through this, because it sounds like he's trying to argue something along the lines of you're going to have healthy people that are infected, some of them are going to die, then you have people that have maybe some kind of immune compromised or respiratory problems or something, that they're more frail, old elderly people, they're going to be more susceptible to COVID, they're going to have a higher mortality rate, and he's what is he trying to argue here with that?
I get, and he's not entirely wrong. I think it's just the way that he's trying to say it. So I think my first point being is the whole idea of, doctors being forced or being told to change autopsy reports and things like that. I get it, but there are such things as, rumors amongst the media, as well as people have to realize that some things come across as unethical as well. So you do have unethical doctors, you do have unethical nurses that we have to look at, but we can't look at it as the general scope of practice, right? And so a lot of those things coming from the media and stating that, we're writing different things on the autopsy reports, it's not always facts.
All right, so let me ask you, if somebody has a COVID infection and they go to a hospital, they go on a ventilator, they get pneumonia, they die. Do they list it as the cause of death because of the pneumonia killed them, or is it because of the COVID which caused the pneumonia that killed them?
And that's the thing that we have to look at as well, right? Is a lot of people have comorbidities, and typically in a hospital, you're trying to look at the biggest picture, essentially. So you can have somebody who comes in with multiple comorbidities, but you could be living a long life with those comorbidities. They could be medically managed. They could also be life sustaining, essentially. And then you have COVID come here, and what, like he's saying, it's kicking them in the ass, right? So I think it's up to doctors and team leads and more the consensus of the hospital, and it all comes down to a lot of politics as well. So yes, some doctors they're saying COVID is what killed them because that's what brought them into hospital. So they could have died from the pneumonia, being on a ventilator, but it was COVID essentially that brought them in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at all these factors, and somebody can die of a stroke, but what led to that stroke? Right? And so we're looking at the bigger picture. It's not just the single diagnosis that we're looking at as well.
Yeah, because if not, you have a reductionist approach, and you can say on everything, cause of death, brain died. I mean, that's
Right.
literally that's going to be the for reductions. Or, you know, if you get shot in the head, your bullet didn't kill him. You have it was a hemorrhaging. Obviously, the brain had a traumatic
Brain
injury, right? So, I mean, I think it makes more sense to go, what is the underlying preliminary thing that happened to the person? It was the COVID. It wasn't the fact that they died from pneumonia. It was the fact that they died from COVID. And then as a from the comorbidity for the COVID, they died of, you know,
I think there's two other factors too,
pneumonia.
right? That one has to do with tracking and how good you are at diagnosing it, which should get better as we get more familiar with Covfefe. So like we didn't know what it was before, so we were like, listen, we're going to diagnose everybody with this because we don't know if they have it or not. And now we're far better at recognizing it and knowing how to handle it.
Yeah, because we could do they could do quick tests now, like instantly.
So it's a lot. Yeah,
and
so it's a lot.
And the results that you can get back are, you know, fairly quickly, right? So it's not just before where, you know, somebody could come in with a common cold and we're diagnosing them with COVID because they have the presenting symptoms of COVID, and otherwise can't diagnose it until that test result has come back.
Mm-hmm. Is this standard now that every? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There was just like no basic diagnosis necessarily just for the common cold, but now we have these swabs and everything that are telling us it's COVID versus the flu versus the cold, what it may be. So we have a better understanding of how to diagnose it.
So it's part of the standard care now that if somebody goes to the hospital, if they present, is if they present symptoms, they get you know tested, or is it anybody who goes to the hospital now get tested?
So
Period.
I think it depends on the hospital. I think it depends on the region as well as their presenting symptoms. So in my instance, you know, because of where I work, we are swabbing everybody who is coming into the unit, and we are swabbing them upon discharge as well, just for contract tracing specifically. But because I work in a unit that has many immunocompromised patients, we're making sure that we're not getting these patients into the unit, you know, after their symptoms have started, especially for those people who could be asymptomatic, right? So we're trying to swab as many people, whether they are symptomatic or not.
There's also the secondary thing that I wanted to touch on was that just because these are the numbers for Covfefe does not mean it's the only numbers we have. Just because they've written it down on the autopsy doesn't mean they don't have the other stuff written down also. So if you're trying to understand these statistics, I think it's probably not conducive to make this kind of an argument because there's nothing saying we're not tracking that they also had a heart attack. We're not tracking that they also didn't have pneumonia. We're not, nobody says that we're not also tracking these things.
Yeah.
So if you want to argue the technicality, and all that's going to be is up to the people who are there at the situation to assess as best as they can. And then as you're getting better at recognizing what did what, because you're better at recognizing the Covfefe itself, then those numbers should get more and more accurate as you go. Whereas, yeah, at first the numbers are going to be all over the place because nobody knows what's going on. Helios for 5 says, a person who dies to a gunshot wound because they were sickly and got infected versus someone who dies to a gunshot wound while they were in peak health.
Well, yeah, but so, and I agree. So if somebody did get a gunshot wound, let's say it was a minor wound, they went to the hospital, they got it treated, but then they somehow contracted MRSA or something like that. The cause of death would be labeled obviously as MRSA, not the gunshot wound. Even though the gunshot wound was a causal factor, it wasn't really the gunshot that killed them. It was the infection that killed them.
But it does not mean that gunshot wound or that previous wound has not been tracked.
Oh, well, yeah, everything's tracked, of course.
The thing is, we have extensive history on all our patients that we receive, you know, in hospital, and it's always there for a quick look. But on the admitting diagnosis, it may not include all of somebody's health history, depending on how extensive it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and RDJ Gamer says, "Yep, Steve, I have a box of 30-minute tests from work that I do twice a week." Yeah, when I said instant, I don't mean like instant second. I know the rapid tests take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that's amazing because it used to take weeks to get results back. A week?
Yeah,
I mean that's
more than that.
By that time, you know, somebody who has the disease a week later, they're going to have issues if they're not, you know, caught early, right? I mean, am I wrong in saying with COVID, the people that are caught early with a lower viral load probably have a better chance of a full recovery than somebody who has not been caught and diagnosed early? Is that typical?
That is typical. And I mean, speaking from experience here, I am somebody who got COVID from being in my workplace, and I was exposed. And about 4 days later, I had absolutely terrible symptoms. I had almost all of these symptoms. I am very thankful that I did not have to be hospitalized and that I was able to recover very quickly. And I mean, the public health system tells you to socially distance, especially from the people in your household. But for those first 4 days after my exposure, the first two, I didn't even know that I had been exposed yet. And going forward with that, my spouse, we did everything normal together. We were hanging out. We were, not separating within our house. And then after we found out, I was obviously staying away, but I was sick for about 16 days with terrible, terrible symptoms, recovered, and am still positive to this day. Whereas my spouse was negative the entire time. He did not get sick. He did not, he was entirely fine. And so it has to look at the viral load for sure, because I mean, I've got underlying health issues myself that could have contributed to how badly I responded to my COVID. And it also has to do with how close in contact my exposure was. And in this case, I was directly doing patient care.
You got a bigger exposure directly to more viral.
I got a much larger exposure than some others would.
So,
for sure.
So let me ask you: you still would test positive, even though you have now clearly have antibodies for that whatever viral strain that of COVID, because obviously there's been mutations and there's some new strains have come out lately. But for the whatever COVID you have the antibodies for that. What is the likelihood of you one catching it again, and two, would you still test positive? I mean, you still have some of the virus in there, or do you think that?
So the viral load is definitely a huge thing, and it's person to person dependent for sure. So what they're saying, and that's the thing, is I think it's person to person and depending on what their antibodies are like to begin with. So our public health system is essentially telling us, don't waste the resources. Once you're positive, you're asymptomatic, you've cleared that 28-day window, which is what they've determined as a good window from, contracting the virus, having it in your system, and then eventually shedding the virus. But I could be shedding the virus for months, and I could be testing positive for months, right?
But would that be infectious virus though, or
that is not infectious?
It's inert at that point, right? Okay.
So it's different for each person, right? And that's where they're having a hard time contracting and contact tracing the virus, is because yes, I'm out of my contagious period. But as somebody who could still be testing positive, I'm not sure whether or not I could contract another form of the virus and be asymptomatic this time and go forward with, continue to test positive versus, continuing to test weekly or bi-weekly until I got a negative result. And then if it came up again, I could be potentially positive again.
Well, this is one of the things why it's important to be doing things like the masks. You didn't know you were exposed. You contracted it for 2 days before you had even realized, and then you were symptomatic.
Exactly.
So had you not worn a mask,
could have been worse.
Your regular day,
had I not worn a mask,
it could have been worse, and two, you could have spread it to everybody around you.
Exactly. So you look at the contact
grocery shopping that day or whatever.
I look at where I was in those 2 days, and you know what? Luckily, I know the protocol. My hospital is very diligent on, making sure that people are trying their best to, go to work and go home and nowhere in between. So for those 2 days, I went to work, came home, did nothing else. But my spouse, who came into contact with myself, if he had contracted the virus, he had gone to work, he had gone to the grocery store, he had gone to the gym. It becomes very complicated when you look at it from that aspect.
Let me ask you one last question before we play the video again. The people that have been exposed and have gone through the 20 days and have the antibodies and all that, is the vaccine less effective for them, or should they take it? Should they not take it? Does it matter? Because there's a lot of factors going into that. Because obviously, they're saying that some of these vaccines may have better chances of working for some of the mutations, but I don't think they really know one way or another. I don't know how I could predict that. But should the people that have been exposed to COVID before, do they need the vaccine?
And you know what? I've been told multiple different stories as well. So looking at the information that I've collected from our public health system and looking at the information that I've collected within our hospital and the media, they're fairly impartial to it for anybody who has had COVID. And the problem is the vaccine is being, it's being given to individuals who have not had COVID first. It's being given to those who are in situations that are look at the nursing homes, look at people who are at more high risk exposure.
Mhm.
And I think once they start dueling out the vaccine to those individuals, they'll continue to duel it out to some individuals who have already had COVID. But in terms of those individuals who have had antibodies already from having COVID, I think it works very differently person to person.
Mhm.
And it depends on how much of that virus you've already shedded at the point of getting that vaccine.
Gotcha.
So I don't think there's enough data to say whether it is completely effective or not against contracting another strain of COVID. I think what they're just trying to do at this point is minimize the exposure for anybody, right?
Yeah, preventative is by far the the best way to go. Just your exposure.
For
Yeah.
sure.
All right, here we go.
Or COVID alone. We have our numbers, though. We can look at the numbers, okay? According to USA Facts, we've got 290,000 Americans have died of COVID-19.
I think people are
That's up to
already-
400,000 now, by the way. Go ahead.
I think people are already suspicious of numbers that are coming out of America anyway, because of so much conspiracy theories, as well as people who are not taking it seriously, as well as people who are medical professionals who think it's a conspiracy. So I would imagine that it's reasonable to be questioning the COVID numbers in America and in other places.
I still think they're going to be approximate, aren't they?
Getting reported properly at very best. What?
They're still going to be
Yeah.
approximate, I guess. I mean, yeah. I mean, none of these are going to be like fastidiously perfect numbers. I think.
I'm saying that his skepticism towards the numbers, I think, is reasonable given the circumstance.
Well, they're just going by. They're just going down what's being reported, right? For the cause of death.
Right.
Yeah. So
But that's the thing, is people don't think it's being reported.
Yeah.
Reporting, and it depends on the region, right?
yes.
So
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
We've only lost 240,000 more people.
only.
Yeah, I know.
Only.
It's like what is I think what Stalin who said. One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. Only 240,000. Yeah, we only lost 240,000 people. I have one death that somebody that I'm still reeling over, and I can't imagine 240,000 people. That'd be like that. Literally is a magnitudes greater than everybody that I know. If everybody I've ever met in my life died, that would be what it would be approximate to. That'd be.
I think
I know what
he's
he's saying. I get it. I'm not. It's just words
he's trying
that
to
he's using.
compare it to total number of people rather than like viewing it as an individual
I know.
basis.
It just sounds
A
odd.
little callous.
Yeah, it's okay though. We all say things when we're doing these things. I get it.
Okay, so if we've only lost 240,000 more people than we had when we didn't have COVID, I think 240,000 should be viewed as the upper bound of the incremental number of deaths that COVID has given.
Well, first of all, you got to remember here, this is only in America. I mean, is it just forgetting all the deaths in the UK and other countries? We're not the only country in the world, right? I mean, there's been millions of deaths worldwide. I mean, what is it, up to 4 million, I believe now?
Wait, do you think he's comparing that to worldwide population, not just American population?
No, but is he talking? Is he talking about worldwide here? Or he's talking about in America.
I think he's just American.
Yeah.
I mean, he's also only looking at the numbers from January 1st to November 28th. And you have to look at the preliminary, few months that we had of COVID where it wasn't so bad. And then the weather warmed up again in the summertime, it wasn't bad. And then it started getting bad with cold and flu season again. So the numbers are going to vary at whatever time of the month or the year that you're kind of looking at, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can't just look at it as a whole from this month to this month.
What would happen? I mean, that's what happens in the colder months usually. It's the flu and cold season. What would happen if somebody did get COVID and they contracted influenza at the same time? It's like a double whammy.
That is a double whammy. That is a good question. We do have diagnostics for the flu as well. So typically we would run both those tests. The flu is, we have a lot more resources to treat that, and it's over time it has become less deadly, right?
Yeah,
and so
but
that's eventually where we want to get with COVID. In the preliminary phases of the flu, look at how many people died. Look at how many people, that we don't realize that we have just brushed off at this point because it's how many years later,
I got
and
to
it's
I got to tell you, I've had the flu in my life many times, like many people, and I never realized just how deadly the flu could be. I mean, we've all been there where we're sick as hell and we're going like, oh my God, we feel like we're going to die, not realizing that you possibly could, right? Because I mean, it is a very potentially deadly disease if not managed properly, especially through dehydration and other things. And I remember one time I was so deathly ill in the military, I had to go to medical. I knocked on the medical door. They opened the door and they're like, "Get in here." I was pale white. I had to have a intravenous IV to get fluids back in me. I should have been dead for all practical purposes. I was that dehydrated. And it's a hell of a feeling. I mean, it is a nasty feeling. But people, I think, underestimate the power of the flu. And the Spanish flu killed, 50 million people, something like that? It's like ridiculously high amounts these flus can cause for deaths. But I think, like you said, we know how to manage the flu better. We can recognize it better. We know how to treat it better, do we not?
We do.
Yeah.
And if we look at it from, our preventative measures, especially this year that we've been taking, if everybody was masking and hand sanitizing on a regular basis with the flu, our cases would continue to decline as well.
Totally.
I think that's kind of funny that what I've taken away from this kind of stuff is the exact opposite of what Silverman has taken away. Because I've been like, yeah, no, let's just wear masks and sanitize more often all the time. That just seems like a good idea. Because he's like, eventually gets to making the flu comparison. And I'm like, if we can stop 60,000 or whatever number it is of people dying from the flu by just having masks be a regular fashion statement now.
And by the way, China's been doing that for a long time. If you're sick in China long before COVID, you wore a mask. I mean, and they
that's same with Japan. That's a common thing. It's in a lot of art.
I will continue, but in a nutshell, it's such a minor inconvenience with so much potential to have the ability to save lives. Why would you not want to just do it? I don't understand the pushback on it.
It's only an inconvenience if you view it that way. It doesn't have to be viewed that way. I don't even view it as an inconvenience. I view it as much of an inconvenience as I do that I feel like I need to wear sunglasses to protect my eyes.
I'm waiting for somebody to say, well, Steve, with your face, I can understand why you want to cover it up more often. I get it. I totally understand. But look, I got, hanging on my wall. I got mine ready to, I got a couple of them actually, obviously. So, I mean, I go out. I'm happy to wear it.
And there's variations. It's not like we're being, subjected to one face mask. We all have to wear the same thing. It's, again.
Oh, that'd be. Imagine if you're in a communist country, everybody had to wear. You had to wear like North Korea. They have like severely had like dress code type stuff. And the haircuts have to be a certain way. Can you imagine if everybody had to wear the same mask? Boy, that would be like.
That would be a lot more difficult. But you could wear like a scarf. You can wear a bandana. You could wear like it's not the end of the world. Like it's such an easy whatever. It's like wearing a hat. Like fucking whatever, man. Yeah. Get over yourself.
All right,
but the thing the problem I have, I think, with David Silverman's argument here is you could easily swing it the complete opposite way. Easily. And say, well, how do we know all these people didn't die from COVID, especially from before we knew that COVID was really as active as it was? So how many numbers might we be able to add to this in the exact opposite way? So like, I just don't think it's a very good argument.
And I think it needs to be noted that does not include a 0.5% growth in population. We're just going to use that 0.5% growth in population as a buffer. Okay, we're just going to ignore it.
You talk slow. I'm going to put it on 1.5 speed.
Incremental deaths at 240,000.
Sorry, Dave.
Average death per year is 87.87%. 0.87 to 1%. That's 87 100ths of 1%. Incremental deaths to 240,000, the upper bound of badness in so far as deaths are concerned for COVID, 240,000, 7.3 100ths of 1%, which is an 8% increase over last year. An 8% increase in deaths year over year, a 7.3 100ths of a percent increase in death attributable to COVID. Okay, again, 94% comorbidities. And let's look at that. Let's look at that. This is from the CDC.gov. And I wanted to show you this. Look, this is total number of deaths. The other place said 290. Here we got 285 for all ages. Look at the skewing of the age. 500, 0 to 24, 2,000 for the 20s, 5,000 for the 30s to mid 40s. But then when you get into the upper bounds, you see this huge increase. And of course, I also wanted you to see that a solid half, almost half, of all COVID deaths also had flu. Okay.
So what?
Yeah, okay, so let's look at this. Yeah, I know the play. The playback's as max as I can go. I can't do anything about it, honestly. All right, so he's basically saying, okay, if we break down the number of deaths per age, this is what it seems to be. And I think we all agree the elderly people are always generally going to be more susceptible to viral infections and health concerns. I mean, clearly, that's just
Of course, yes.
a fact. So what is this? He's trying to argue on that then?
Yeah, I don't know what the point is. So what? Is it? I think what he ends up trying to say is that, well, I'm not in that range, so I should be allowed to risk my life because he removes himself from the risk he's putting onto other people. Because, like he said at the beginning, well, I should be allowed to choose to wear my mask, and you should be allowed to choose to stay away from somebody without a mask. And it's like that's not how
that doesn't make any
society
sense. Yeah, that's not an argument in my opinion, because let's say you are in the demographic. Let's say you're in the 25 to 34 demographic, and so let's say you are less susceptible, because I don't know. It's hard to quantify what less susceptible would be as opposed to somebody of a more geriatric age. But we'll agree, arguendo, that younger people that are going to be generally more healthy, they're going to have less susceptibility. But as Nurse Stubbs, I'm sure you're going to agree, those people still can be asymptomatic, and those people are still vectors.
Exactly. We also have to look at a big portion of it in being, the whole idea of herd immunity, right? We look at the populations that are affected by it and our immune systems and how they're functioning. And for individuals, we look at the group population. So I think what he's looking at here is ages, 0 to 24. You look at how many deaths there were. It's because we tend to have a higher immunity. And as we go through life, our bodies are breaking down. Our immune system is not as great. We're also looking at a larger population with those individuals as well, which I don't know if he's necessarily taking account for.
That's actually a really good point.
Let me talk a little bit about the flu. The flu kills about 24,000 to 62,000 people per year.
Flu comparison.
Another site that said that we lost about 60,000 people in 2018. And I'm going to use the number 60,000 people because I want to make it a point that if it was 60,000 people dying, nobody would know. Nobody would care. 62,000 people dying every year, we could prevent those deaths, We could cover our mouths all the time.
Absolutely.
Social distance all the time.
And maybe we should.
60,000 would probably go way down. We'd probably save tens of thousands of lives, but we're not going to do that, okay? Because personal responsibility is a thing, and it takes risk there to live in this country. And
let me stop there real quick, because the main issue I have with this, and let me ask Nurse Stubbs here. We understand that the flu has been around for a very long time. People have died from the flu for as long as man's body's been around. But the transmission rate for the flu is far less as the transmission rate for COVID, right? Because COVID has a very high rate of transmission, much more than the flu. And if it was uninhibited, if there was no precautions in place, the deaths would be exponential compared to what the flu would be, would they not?
They would. And so you have to look at trying to say it as broad as I can, you have to look at the microbiology and organisms of these viruses as well. And so the reason why, the flu is not so transmissible is because it's a smaller particle of a virus that, you're transmitting across a space. It doesn't last in the air as long. It's not being, we have to look at the things that we cannot see, which is it's a very hard concept for a lot of people to grasp, for sure. And so when you're looking at COVID, you're looking at the transmission from, airborne, from touching, from, different things similar to the flu. It's just much larger particles that are being transmitted.
Now they have noticed since they've done a lot of these mandatory masks and using PPE that the rate of transmission for the flu has gone down as well, has it not?
Oh, it has, for sure.
Sure.
I think it becomes a lot of personal, like he's saying, personal neglect, I think, when it comes to the flu, and just not understanding the whole dynamic of it and how far along we are in terms of diagnosis and research and preventative measures for the flu as well. We've definitely come a long way.
Keep in mind that there's also a huge difference for people who are Americans versus people in a country that has universal health care. America doesn't have that. So you've got people who are dying from the flu because they didn't go to the doctor early enough when they should have. Or people who have underlying medical issues that aren't getting those treated, and then they get the flu and then they die, and it's way too late by the time they get to the hospital, if they get to the hospital to begin with. So he's talking about this personal responsibility, but when you're put in a system where you're set up to fail, or you're discouraged from getting the care that you need, then what personal responsibility can you possibly have? And on top of that, you're running into this thing where it's like, oh well, there's personal responsibility. So what does he expect people to do? So what personal responsibility are you putting on to people? Should people who have asthma, like, are you talking like somebody who has asthma should always carry their asthma medication? That kind of personal responsibility? Or are you talking about that anybody of a certain age as personal responsibility should be wearing a mask? Like, so if you're above the age of 40, should you just always be wearing a mask now?
I think if you're an asthmatic and carrying around your asthma medication is personal responsibility, or if you have allergic reactions, you have an EpiPen or something, those are personal responsibilities.
Right.
But here's a situation that he hasn't yet addressed. These have been mandated, or at least in some places are mandated, some places they're highly recommended, but by the CDC and by regions of experts that have evaluated and says, and this is a social concern.
Right.
This has to do with society. It is no longer it is me, personal responsibility. It's not individual. It is societal at that point. And I'm sorry, individuals have responsibilities to society. Matter of fact, there's a book out there called What Do We Owe to Each Other? And a lot of it is about contractualism and what are the moral obligations that we have to people in society and things of that nature. Because we love to say, especially in America, this is one thing that is more unique to America than other places. America loves our freedoms, but it's a lot of entitlement.
I also think that negligence is probably a better word rather than personal responsibility. Yeah, those two things go hand in hand, but it's far more clear to me if you say, hey, listen, you got the flu because you were negligent. You went out, you did your thing, and you didn't wash your hands when you went home. You were negligent. You could have washed your hands. You chose not to. It's not the personal responsibility to never leave the house, because he seems to be conflating social distancing and wearing a mask and Covfefe and the flu. The point is that Covfefe is not at the level of the flu, and we're doing all that we're doing to get it to the level of the flu.
Yeah, we're trying to bring it down because, again, if we didn't do any of this, it would have been devastating. 1 billion people could have lost their lives. 1 billion.
Many more than what we have already done.
Yeah.
It's terrible when they go. When people die, it's awful when humans die, when lives are lost. But at the same time, we're not going to, we don't do anything for those 60,000 deaths. We have parties and concerts and all the parties when 60,000 people die in a year.
But
here's the thing. Should you? Maybe you should be doing something.
It's a balance, right? These are balances. People have to live their lives, and,
I agree, but what about wearing a mask is preventing you from living your life? Social distancing, sure, yeah, that is restrictive. That does stop you from going to the bar. But wearing a mask.
But where do you draw the line? Okay, should we say, nobody should drive a car because car accidents, you can die in a car accident, so nobody should drive?
Do you want my thoughts about cars? Because I'll give them to you.
I take mass transportation, but everything's a balance to society, and the whole thing.
I agree, but we're talking about two different kinds of things here. One is actually restrictive, and the other one isn't. And when you conflate those two things to make a point, you're not making the point you think you are.
Perhaps
you shouldn't have to, right? So, like I said, do you think that it's a personal responsibility if you're going to go out driving in the snow during a sunny day and it's bright out, that it's your personal responsibility to wear your sunglasses? Yes.
Or
Of course.
personal. It's your personal responsibility if you're going to drink to get a designated driver.
Right. So why wouldn't you want to make the social expectation, such as wearing a seatbelt, and just add masks onto it? They're not restricting anything. So it's not the same to say, oh yeah, no, it makes sense to wear a mask.
Well, there is a restriction though.
You can drive cars.
People,
no.
There is a restriction
But follow the rules.
But there are places
the
out there that say if you can't come in without a mask, they are being restricted.
Right. That's not the restrictive part.
But that is a restriction.
The difference of no shirt, no service, you know, like.
Right.
Yeah, well, I have no problem with denial of service for people that are not wearing masks in certain places. I mean, private businesses can do what the hell they want, right? Federal's a little bit different, but for private businesses, if they say no shirt, no shoes, no service, they can uphold that. And same thing with mask wearing.
Right, but that's not the mask being the thing. That's like, you are not restricted in going wherever you want to go because of this mask. This is a different issue, right? So I want to go back to the car analogy real quick. So if I say, oh, you should wear a mask, oh, well, then shouldn't people drive on the road? Well, no, that would be, the better comparison would be, you're allowed to drive on the road, but you have to follow these rules to drive on the road. You can go grocery shopping, but you need to follow the rules when you're going grocery shopping. And if the rule is wearing a mask, the rule is wearing the mask. It's not restrictive.
That's fine.
Right?
All right.
To something that's, let's say about a little less than 5 times as much. A little less than 5 times. And if we go to 240, well, if we go to 240, it's 4 times as much. If we use the incremental death number, 240,000, flu is 1/4 as deadly as COVID-19. Now, there's more I want to show you. Look at these death statistics again. Again, this is published December 21st, 2020. So this is recent. Now look at this death chart here.
Wait, hold on 1 second. He's using the statistics from 2019, and didn't COVID explode at the very beginning of 2020?
I believe you're correct.
Yeah, look like it. Yeah.
Why is he using the 2019 statistics?
There are some noted cases of COVID 2019, but yes, it did not explode until
March of 2020. I remember it well.
So what you're telling me is we didn't use any restrictions for 2019, and he's complaining about restrictions using 2019 numbers. Then we added restrictions because it exploded because we didn't use any restrictions.
And had we, and I'm convinced of this, and there's Stubbs, feel free to tell me right or wrong, but I'm convinced had we had these restrictions in place at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, we would have saved hundreds of thousands of people worldwide.
Oh, yes.
I mean, especially in America, I think Trump was way slow to react to this stuff. I think he downplayed it on purpose. I think they were just inept at the handling of this. You want to know who wasn't? Wait, real quick. Go over to over to Australia and go over to
New Zealand is really great.
New Zealand. Oh my God, New Zealand they get one case that makes the news.
I'm pretty sure they're like pretty much back to normal. They are a fully functioning society again.
Yeah, well, we could have been that way too.
What they do now is if they get a case, they shut down the area instead of shutting down the entirety of everything. They just go, okay, like this area, we're gonna go track everything.
Yeah, they isolate it. They isolate it, and they basically eliminate it. We could have done that for 3 or 4 months, and it would have been amazingly different. But no, we had people in place that didn't take this seriously. I'm sorry. I blame the administration. Who's the blame? We know it could work if they did it properly because New Zealand did it, and same with other places.
And you know what? The problem is in North America here is we focus a lot on the economic side of things as well, right? And we're not focusing so much on the overall health of individuals, but rather the economic standpoint and how long we can last in certain situations.
Well, how much did it cost to have it shut down for years compared to would have been 3 or 4 months? It would have been a quarter of the time probably. Yeah, so
for sure.
they didn't plan ahead. All right, continue on.
But I'm not gonna lie, this just blew my mind. I didn't notice this when I watched
Yeah, no,
it
you're right. He
before.
was using 2019.
He's complaining about the numbers being low in 2019 when no restrictions were in place.
Right.
And because there weren't any restrictions in place, the numbers skyrocketed.
Which
and now
shows
he's complaining
that
restrictions in place while the numbers got really, really high. This is some backwards ass bullshit.
Yeah, it seems to work
Dave.
against his argument here a little bit.
David, David, this is some backwards ass bullshit you're doing right here. No, I don't think it's malicious. I don't think it's
No, I don't think it's
necessarily
over either. But I mean, it kind of shows that that because we
Right.
didn't have these restrictions, we didn't have these mandates, we didn't have these effectively people having some kind of PPE to go into places, that it did have an exponential growth of cases. And so,
This is
yeah,
a-
you know.
bro
Deaths in
moment.
2020
This is a
are
super
higher than
bro
average
moment.
in most age groups, especially in the 25 to 44-year-olds. That big spike for the 25 to 44-year-olds. Now that's interesting because
we're the most
moron.
uncompliant people in the world, apparently.
Well, I mean, could that be that that age group is the ones? I mean, those are the ones that probably say, "Hey, you know what? We're going to go to these parties anyways. We don't believe in any of this. They're more conspiratorial. They're more social. Wouldn't it be surprising that they have a higher rate of infection at that point? Wouldn't it?
It's got to do with a lot of education as well towards these people.
Mhm.
And the lack of.
Yeah, lack thereof.
His videos are pretty specific. He seems to know exactly what he's talking about. The CDC has said that your fatality rate for over 65 is 1.3%. 50 to 64, it's 0.2%. That's a 99.8% survival rate for people like me. And if you're under 50, your survival rate of getting COVID is 99.95%, with an overall best estimate. That's how that
Steve, can you tell me when this video he's looking at is from? I can't quite see it.
Uh,
I don't know if you
no,
can tell.
it doesn't have it on there. I can see.
Does it have the title?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe when it goes back from being.
I
No.
can't tell.
COVID. All it says is COVID.
Okay, let me look at this. Okay, let me ask you this. Okay, if let's say you Cheshire, right? Do you drive?
No.
You don't drive. Okay.
Do you want my opinions on cars?
Well, no, but let's say you have. No, okay, Dubs. I assume you drive. Okay.
I do drive.
Okay, so every day you drive. Okay, let's say you go to work every day, or at least 5 days a week. So at least 200 times a year or more you drive. Every time you get in a car, you have a 1% chance of dying and getting in a car accident. You're not going to make it through that year. The chances are against you.
They very much are.
I don't think he understands that. I wouldn't want a 1% if I'm exposed to 100 people at a time, or all these, I have all these exposure rates, vectors that are influencing my getting COVID, and even at a 1% rate, that somebody's going to die. I mean, I don't understand his reasoning here.
It's a little bit worse than that. That's just talking about the number of people that are going to die, not the number of people that are going to get infected, which are then going to exponentially infect more people and therefore cause more deaths. So your 1% suddenly
1% doesn't sound like a lot, but 1% is a lot if you think about it.
1% is a lot, and you also have to look at the immediate death versus the long-term effects of this as well, right?
Oh, so yeah, it's like changing it. You have a 1% chance of instead getting into a car accident and not necessarily dying from it, and then having whatever effects are left over from that.
Yeah, well, other people can die from that accident too. Same thing, right?
Vaccines, all sorts of things that could come of that, right?
With an overall death rate of 4%. Because things change. We are looking at a 20 to 50% asymptomatic infections rate. Asymptomatic infections do spread the virus. The best estimate for asymptomatic people is 35%. Okay, so there's a couple things.
A lot of people.
This is a straight up lack of understanding of statistics, I think, or being able to liken that number to reality.
Grand total, 7,500, 7,700. Okay, that's 7,700 human beings right there. But that's much more than 7,500 human beings. That's a 45.5% increase in 25 to 44-year-olds. That's not.
Did he make the? Hold on, pause for a second. Did he make the jump on his spreadsheet to 2020 instead of 2019? Because he was using 2019 numbers and now he's using 2020 numbers.
Apparently.
Okay. Just
I don't know what it is, but it
saying, if he's
doesn't look
doing the
like
math, he might have forgotten to carry the 1.
All right, so he's saying he doesn't know what the spike is from. I mean, like I said, I think it makes sense that age group is probably going to be the less educated, the more social, the more defiant.
Does he forget that summer break is a thing?
Yeah, how many people went to some? How many people, when they said don't go to the beach, and congregate, went to the beach and congregated?
Yeah,
Well, that's why we have to look at institutions as well. I mean, look at the amount of individuals who are in universities and high schools at that point,
Mhm.
or who are working jobs. Primarily, look at all of our, grocery stores and essential businesses that are open right now. Who is primarily the individuals working?
yeah.
Yeah,
The
it's
people
that
who are actually,
demographic. Yep,
The current
yeah, that
population
demographic
is the 25 to 30 range, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
now some people say that the long-term health effects are substantial with COVID. So I did a little bit of that, of search into that. And first thing I wanted to show you is there's a lot of long-term health effects with the cold and the flu. Okay, there's a lot of potential long-term health effects for the cold and the flu. Some of you are seeing these. You know that these are known problems with the flu. And then, so here's a risk from the. Here's a set of slides from the WHO talking about COVID-19. What we know about COVID-19, when you look at the long-term effects, yeah, it may have symptoms for 14 to 21 days. These symptoms for 14 to 21 days.
long-term effects.
Okay.
Meanwhile, we're only
Yeah. I mean,
seeing this.
how do they know? How much data do we really have on long-term effects when we're still in the middle of the pandemic?
Right, and they're focusing on the preventative measures at this point. And I mean, we have done a lot of work towards doing the research for long term, but I think once it is in effect and we've kind of got a hold on the virus first, I think then they'll start looking at different things that have kind of prolonged COVID and how many full recovery people have been a part of society, and then the people who are still with lasting effects. I know individuals, I recovered very quickly, but I know individuals who, are still suffering with some of the symptoms 6, 8 months later,
Hmm.
right? And because it's still so fresh in society, we don't have the appropriate data necessarily. And I think it's
It's
going
so
underreported as well.
human
What?
beings are also tend to be very, very biased towards problems that you can see, like visually, versus problems. So, like, just take any kind of disability, for example. If you have I'm missing a leg, you can make that very obvious. And so nobody's going to give you a hard time about it. Like if you're parking in the disabled parking. But if you're parking in the disabled parking and your disability is not something so obvious, you're going to get dirty looks. So, like, it's not like Covfefe is necessarily going to lop your arm off and make it obvious to everybody that this is a long-term lasting effect of getting this virus. Instead, the things are going to be less. They're not going to be visual.
Yeah, well, and I've seen it happen with people. I hate when people like think that people park in a parking space, handicapped parking space, and they don't have something that obviously that could not be visible, right? I mean, but when you talk about long-term effects, that could mean a lot of things. I mean, it depends on what the long-term effect that they're talking about. It could be months down the line, it could be years down the line, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years. What do they mean by long-term effects? I mean, I think that probably it probably varies a lot from disease to disease what they mean by a long-term effect, I would imagine.
Oh, it does for sure. And you have to look at essentially who did the research and what information they're gathering and what their interpretation of long term is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you have something that's like readily curable, and I mean, like some minor, like a scrape. What's the long-term effect of a scrape? Okay, you might get a scar, right? But if you get
Depending.
the long-term effect would be the potential to get an infection, obviously. But let's say you do get the infection, then there are additional long-term effects, obviously, that can come from that.
Let's say you get gangrene and now you have to lop your hand off.
Yeah, I mean, so
long-term effects.
Yeah, I mean, my dad had CPOD, and he also had to have a multiple stents put in for his heart, and he had a pacemaker put in. All these had because of long-term effects that just build up over time. So, yeah.
For a period of 2 to 3 weeks, but what they did here is they compared it to SARS because we don't know the long-term effects. It can result in prolonged illness. There are many case reports of people who do not regain their previous health following COVID-19. Little is known about the clinical course. So, yeah.
Well, there you go. Little is known because there's a lot of still research in this area. We're still getting data on some of this long-term stuff. How could we even predict what, for example, no offense, Nurse Dubs, but we don't know what the hell the fact that you had COVID might affect you 10 years down the line.
Exactly. We have no idea. We have no
No
idea.
idea. It's not possible.
Months from now, you know, like.
I mean, they can make every model in the world, but until they get substantive data from actual real-world information, it's speculation at best.
I think, you know, in comparing it to SARS as well is, I mean, I can't speak for myself. I was fairly young when SARS was kind of around, and I wasn't, you know, looking at the media, and I was just going based on everything that I had been told. But look at the uproar that we had during SARS, and it's nowhere close to what the COVID pandemic has caused.
Oh yeah, I remember SARS, and I remember, you know, people and swine flu. I mean, I remember a whole bunch of times they're like, you know, these are going to be, you know, these are, you know, major things that we got, but there was never a full-on pandemic. I don't think we've seen anything like this since probably there's some influenza outbreaks that have been in the 20th century, but this is probably, you know, even my parents' lifetime, nothing's ever they've seen before like this.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just glad I got halfway through this video before I opened my beer.
There are long-term effects.
I need a drink.
We know a lot of things. We know that it may, like this slide, it may increase the risk of long-term health problems, but that's all they got. And they're basing that on SARS. But again, there are long-term health effects for the flu, too. So that's kind of a wash. But look at this.
I don't understand his argument. Can you walk me through this argument, Dubs? Because I don't see where he's going with this.
I don't understand it's a wash.
There's long-term effects for everything.
Yeah.
There's long-term effects for everything. So doing a comparison is highly, you know, misinterpreted. You know, yes, there are long-term effects, but the outcome for those long-term effects aren't anywhere near as substantial as what they're finding so far with the long-term effects, if you can even say long-term effects of this COVID virus.
Gotcha. By the way, I just noticed this too. Smitty's right. Dubs does sound like Getsep Gibbon, doesn't she? Yeah.
The question is does Gibbon sound more like me or
no?
Because that's a thing. There's been times where I've been like, I walked away from a video that as it was ending and the next video played and I thought I heard myself.
Really? No, she sounds more like Dubs. Anyways.
Gotta get all three of us in a call and we'll
there you go. It'll be confusing, but we got this.
Because I want you all to see this chart, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this chart. This is a chart that shows the upper line is confirmed cases per day, and the lower line is confirmed deaths per day. And in April, you can see that we're dealing with a 2, let's see, that's 2 to 25, so that's a 12 to 1 difference. 26, that's a 10 to 1 difference. 26 to 25, that's 11 to 1 difference.
We also didn't have the diagnostics to do now.
Is that 2020?
It's 2020, yeah. May.
Okay.
A place where there's a 10 to 11 to 12 to 1 ratio between deaths and cases back in the first push.
Now, also though, during the early part of 2020, they weren't reporting these things as much either, were they?
Right.
We were reporting them as much. You know, we were very quick to shut most things down. At least, I don't know, at least our area, we were very quick to say, you know, absolutely nothing. Everything shut down all in a matter of a week, right? And so there was underreporting. There was a huge fear that, you know, caused a lot of people not to go out into society. And so, yeah, the contraction of the virus was far less at that time.
Well, this was a mistake that I think Trump and his administration kept making over and over and over and over and over and over again. They didn't understand the difference between new COVID cases and new reporting of cases.
Yes.
Not the same thing.
Absolutely not.
There's also like this is part of my now that I noticed it, I'm not going to be able to let it go. It's that he was complaining about 2019 numbers and now he's talking about 2020
He's stuck
numbers.
on that.
And I'm not gonna get over this because now I'm like trying to reframe all of his argument and complaint that he presented at the beginning, which was based on these numbers, to an entirely different set of numbers. So I'm not really sure if his arguments are supposed to carry over or if he's presenting something new or if he's I don't know. I feel
We
like
are
using the
halfway
2019
through though.
numbers-
We made it halfway through.
Using the
already.
2019 numbers at the very beginning screwed up his entire argument.
You're saying you just should have stuck with the 2020 data.
Either just stick with the 2020 data or just stick with the 2019 data.
Yeah, I don't think it
or
was.
if
I don't
you're
think. Why would you stick with the 2019 though? Because that obviously
Why
wasn't.
would you use it at all?
It was a very isolated incident, I find, with 2019.
Yeah.
I do-
Grew as time went on.
It's with my brain,
we got better
man.
at treating COVID, folks. We got better at it. And now look at this, okay? Everybody's talking about all the cases, but we're talking about a 100 to 1 difference here. Look at this, almost a 100 to 1 difference between the number of cases and the number of deaths. The number of deaths is at right now. This one is 2,800. Let's go back here. The number of deaths was 1,900. So it's gone up by less than 1,000 a day. 1,000 human lives we're losing. But look at the survivability. Look at the when you're talking about all of the deaths and people are looking at how deadly this was. It's not looking deadly here.
Okay,
Wow,
that's where
it
that's where you
like we started using PPE or something.
and
Wow.
this is he does
People are
okay.
not
It is
walking,
extremely
you know.
deadly disease because of the fact it has a high infection rate. That's what makes it more deadly, because if you replicate something quicker, if you have a higher transmission because you have all these vectors going out, you have more people exposed, they're going to have more deaths. It's an exponential type function. That's what makes it deadly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he seems to be thinking from an individual person, well, you only have like a 1% chance of dying. But you fact that over a population that has more exposure, you have a hell of a lot more deaths.
It goes back to the basics, how they've been trying to explain it, There's Wendy who's gone to work and now she's exposed 10 people. And
Yeah.
those 10 people have exposed 10 people on their own. And you look at the exponential difference and how large it could get. And when does it end? When does the transmission end at this point?
When somebody puts a damn mask on.
Well, that's what they rely on. If a person has a mask and they don't affect those other 10 people, then those 10 people never went on to affect other 10 people.
There's also
There's a whole
the
boundary of, this whole idea of herd immunity.
Mhm.
Once everybody is doing these same actions or everybody is following the same rules, of course it's going to go down.
Yeah.
There's also, you've got this difference in, now we've had time to learn how the virus, to be able to recognize it, how it functions, how to treat it, how to recognize it earlier, and organize ourselves in a way that, so do we stop organizing ourselves in a way, and what's going to happen to that number?
If we stopped all, obviously it'd be going back up. I mean,
If we forgot everything that we knew about Covfefe, like just out of your brain, you don't know how to treat it, you don't know what it is, you don't know how it spreads, and then you took away all of the measures and everything that the hospitals do to quarantine, and you take all of the quarantine rules out, and you put travel back, and you reopen everything, and nobody wears a mask anymore, you just set everything back, and you've already got those kinds of numbers. What's going to happen to those numbers if you were to take all that away?
yeah, it'd be exponential growth.
We're going right back up because
real quick,
and then it grew.
before we get back to the video, what is the end goal here? Because obviously this is never going to completely go away. It's not. It's in the biosphere. It's going to be just like the cold. It's effectively, I think, the virus is going to mutate to the point where it's going to be similar to the cold, because a virus doesn't want to kill its host because it doesn't replicate. So that kind of virus will eventually die out of its own, because it hasn't have the mechanisms. It needs your body's mechanism to replicate itself. And if you kill that person and it doesn't replicate, that dies out. So it has to be less infectious, I would think, at least the strains that are now at a period of time. And eventually everybody's probably going to get it, and it'll be very similar to the code at some point way in the distant future. But what are they hoping now? Because it can never obviously be removed from the biosphere now, what's the goal? Because obviously we can't have these precautions in perpetuity. I got that word in there. Just so I gets the joke. So what's the end goal on that, Dubs?
I would think that it's similar to any virus, anything that we face in society. You look at the overall outcome, and looking back at death rates and illness, we want to make sure that it's slowed down to the point that the transmission is almost impossible, and we want to make it that it's something similar to the flu. That yes, it's not ideal, but our immunity has been able to fight against it. We are seeing a lot less hospitalized cases as well as deaths, and that's not going to happen overnight.
I think, I couldn't agree more. I think that over a period of time, we'll have less transmission rates, and our over time as new generations will have more and more immunity to it, and because we will have more immunity, it'll become less virulent. It'll be a balance out, and it'll still make you sick. It's a virus, but it's not going to have the deadly aspect to it, because again, viruses don't want to kill its host, right? I mean, that makes no sense.
That are bothering me about the way Silverman's argument is kind of set up. Firstly, he's against shutdowns and he wants everything to be open. And then he's saying, well, it should be on personal accountability. So if you don't want to be around anybody that isn't wearing a mask, you shouldn't have to be. And if they don't want to wear a mask, they shouldn't have to wear a mask. This is all well and good in a society that's not dealing with a pandemic. When it's not as bad as it is, I think I would agree, and that should be fine. But when you get to a more extreme circumstance, you need to start taking a little bit more cautious measures until it gets to a point where it's no longer going to be that.
Yeah, I think everybody would agree with that.
I think overall too, I'd love to know how his opinion would change if he or somebody that he knew, personally was affected by COVID, and if that would change his opinion on this.
Well, I think it would be more along the lines of, let's say that there's a person who's asymptomatic, not wearing a mask. They happen to cough on like a basket or something for like a shopping cart. And they've been, by the way, all these places have been doing a wonderful job keeping these things cleaned, right? Sanitized all of them. But let's say that they did, let's say they didn't or something. And now David got sick because he went to the store. He's not wearing a mask, but the person before him didn't wear a mask. They got it on the surface, and then he contracted it.
So you end up with this
personal accountability at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right.
He's going to blame somebody else for contracting the virus. Meanwhile, it was his choice not to wash his hands, not to wear a mask.
It sounds to me that it's going one way. He's personally responsible if he gets sick, but he's not taking into account his responsibility in making someone else sick.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There's a secondary part to this that's got my brain like I don't understand, and it's he's saying that he wants everything to reopen, and then he's saying, well, I don't know why there's this spike in young people. And it's like, because you're putting them more at risk. The person working at the store doesn't have a choice if you're going to open everything up and say you don't have to wear a mask. They have to be there. And even if they wear a mask, the amount that you're now putting them at risk and exposing them that they don't have a choice to be there, they got to pay their bills. Even if they do take as much precaution as they personally can, it's not good enough when you've got 1,000, 2,000 people going through your store a day. And
that's a lot of people.
If you've got 5% of them wearing masks, and you don't know who has and who doesn't have, and some people are asymptomatic, and you can't avoid somebody who has it. It's not like they've got a big red sticker on their forehead that says, I'm asymptomatic COVID.
When I was in retail, let's say I had like 100 customers a day. I mean, that would be the receipts. Like, even I remember when we had to actually track our receipts way back when in the late 80s. I was in high school, but I was still worked for Radio Shack, and we had manual receipts. We had to like literally and write them out, and and then at the end of the day, I had to type them in a Tandy 2000 computer, and there would be over 100 receipts, and you had to manually type them all in. So I remember that even back then, I dealt with like at least 100 people on the average. Out of those 100 people, every person that comes into contact with you, if all of them had personal decisions not to wear a mask, I have now 100 people that have been potentially exposed to.
And let alone exchanging of money and keypads.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
Or coin.
Yeah, it was all cash based back then for the most part. Yeah, a lot of it was cash based.
The only way that David's argument for personal accountability applies is if he has a garden on his own and never leaves his property.
I hate to say this, but I'm going to throw it out there, and people give me flack or whatever. But I'm sorry, Dave. A lot of this sounds like narcissism to me. It just does. It's just it. And I'm not saying that he is, because I know true narcissists.
I don't think it's narcissism.
But
it's just a little bit selfish.
Well, that's what it is, though. It's like, I don't want to wear a mask because people can't see my beautiful face or something. I don't know. It just comes across that way because I know David. David, But it's and I hate to say that, but it's like that's how I kind of like read behind the lines with, because maybe that's only because I happen to talk to David many times and I know how he actually is. I'm not saying he's a narcissist, but he is a pretty boy. And he likes that fact. And I'm wondering if he's against wearing a mask just because I don't know. Maybe it's just like what's the word? Ego, or not even ego. What's the word?
There's
like self-righteousness, I think, in terms of just looking at it from a bigger picture.
Yeah, I would use that too. It's not that what I'm going for though, but I'll think of it.
I think that's there's a you could have it transmitted to you without you catching it, right? So like if Dubs here has Covfefe, and she avoids it as much as she can, but she needs to pick something up, and let's say I live nearby or something, and so she touches a fence or something, and then I walk by and I touch that fence. I could be carrying it now, but I might not get infected. But then I touch the door handle on my door, and as far as I know, I haven't been in contact with anybody because it was on a surface. And now anybody in my house who touches that door could run the risk of getting infected, even though I never even got infected. Yeah. I just moved it from point A to point B.
In technical terms, yes. I mean, they have done a lot of research to show that, the length of life for this virus and transmitting on surfaces is much lower than in, close proximity and contact with another person. It definitely does not last on surfaces like we originally thought it would,
It's in the hours, right? And it depends on if it's wet or dry, right?
And, but the actuality of it is that as soon as it touches the surface, it starts to die off. So as it touches one surface, goes to another surface, the amount of the virus is diminished for sure. So yes,
actually, the word I was thinking is conceit. Dave's a little conceited. That's a good one.
I was thinking.
Sorry, Dave. He's a little conceited, man.
I was going a little bit to the extreme because what David is proposing is nobody's wearing any mask, or you wear. I shouldn't say nobody. Nobody needs to wear a mask. You can wear a mask if you want to. You don't wear a mask if you don't want to, and that should be fine, and that should be good enough, and nothing should be closed. So what happens when you need to go to the store, and the person working in the store decides they don't want to wear a mask? Yeah. You have to interact with that person.
Yeah.
They're your checkout.
There's their personal choice too at that point, right?
It's their personal choice to not wear it, and they've just seen 200, 300, 1,000 people go through their store, and now you're going to go through. What personal responsibility can you possibly have to protect yourself? The only answer is not going out.
Right.
So what? These people just shouldn't be able to go get groceries?
Well, that's the thing, is you're taking away somebody else's autonomy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the mask is not imposing on your, it's not restrictive. It's a non-restrictive thing. Putting hand sanitizer on is non-restrictive. Closing businesses down, restrictive.
Yeah,
social distancing, restrictive.
And I do think that we can't close business forever. And I think the governor of California, Newsom, he finally realized, we have to be able to open these businesses on a limited thing, which they could have done from the beginning. And they actually found by opening up the businesses on a limited thing, having outdoor seating, and distancing has actually lowered the transmission rate.
Yeah, we did that in Canada when things when we realized things shut down. They shut down for 3 months. And then they slowly opened up what they could open up, and then restricted some in some areas a little bit more, and let other places go open a little bit more, depending. And it was the decision was made by that local government, because that local government knew the right amount of.
Yeah.
It would know the best for their area, so it wasn't like a federal wide thing. And so you ended up in a situation where bars were able to open patios up until things started getting out of hand again. And so once things got out of hand again, they're like, okay, we got to shut down again. We're gonna open you back up as soon as we can. Schools, this, that thing, that, and you kind of you be malleable to deal with the situation as it goes.
All right, continue on. Got 10 minutes left.
Most of those deaths, the vast majority, are sick or elderly. They're going to be over 65. They're isolatable. They're going to be fat.
You just showed that it was not the case, though.
Yeah, it wasn't at 30 up to 20 to 34.
There was a spike that he didn't know. So if you were to overlay his previous graph with that graph, I don't think he can make that assumption.
It's not comparable for sure.
Isolatable. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us are looking at a very, very livable flu with about 35% to 50% of the symptoms are completely asymptomatic, and people like me in reasonable health in our 50s has a 99.8% chance of survivability. This is way better than it was originally. I remember back in March, it was 1.7%. We had a 1.7% chance of dying of this.
Is he grumpy that people have figured out how to fight it?
Yeah, and the people
we're taking precautions, so obviously it's more survivable.
Because we've had better precautions, and we know how to probably treat it better. Which again, the treatment from
what if your nurse or doctor doesn't believe in wearing a mask when they do surgery?
Their personal choice, right? No, the hospital gets they mandate that you don't have a personal choice at that point.
When you work amongst an organization, exactly, you do not have personal choice.
Yeah, I was just teasing.
0.2%, and that's assuming 0.2%. And frankly, folks, that's completely up to me. That's my thing. And when somebody says I went to a gas station and I didn't have a mask on, and she said it's for your safety, and I've been thinking about that. It's not for my safety. It's not at all for my safety. If it's for my safety, it would be my choice. It would be my...
All right. Let me address this, because I think
Can I sue him if I shake his hand and get sick?
Well, this is the problem that I have. It's only his choice if he didn't interact with anybody ever.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
That's it. I mean, it's simple as that.
If he has a garden, in his backyard, never has to go grocery shopping, never has to leave the house, makes his own pulp for toilet paper. I don't care what he does, but if he doesn't leave,
sure,
then fine, because he's not interacting with other people in
that's my
criticism.
Isolation. Yes,
as most as you can, then you're fine. I would agree with that. You're choosing, because the choice is about whether you stay in or not.
I would make the analogy as, hey, if you want to go play in your own driveway, knock yourself out. But as soon as you start playing on the freeway, it's no longer a personal responsibility. Now you're affecting other people.
Do you think David Silverman's the kind of person who doesn't get out of the way playing road hockey when the car drives by, and he's just like, no, it's my personal responsibility.
Exactly.
I can choose to play here, so he can drive.
Little brat just didn't run fast enough.
The person can choose to drive around me, or they can hit me. That's their personal choice. That's their responsibility.
I don't understand how. I'm serious. I don't know how he doesn't see it. Again, it boils down to that very simple concept. You have personal responsibility and autonomy for your own being if you do not interact with anybody else. As soon as you have societal things, you have to take that into account. Like I said, I'm allowed to play in my driveway if I want to. Nobody can stop me. Knock yourself out. But as soon as I go to the freeway, you can't do it any longer. You're no longer on your own terms.
Is because he's putting that responsibility on other people. He's saying that if I'm responsible and can make this choice, then other people are responsible and make that choice.
That's foolish.
And so but he's relying on other people being more responsible and more caring, so he doesn't have to be.
I would say this then. What he's doing is called idealism. He has an idealistic view of things. And sure, I'm not even going to go grant this. If Dave would be right, if everybody thought the exact same way, perhaps then, everybody would have their own personal responsibility. They would all do what they're supposed to do, and things would go down. I get that, but that is an idealistic viewpoint. And I tell you, nothing ever in the reality will match what happens when you have idealism. Never. It's not possible. I find
it's kind of bizarre that he's saying everybody should have their own personal responsibilities, and you should inform yourself, and you should do what you think is right for you. And then he's saying that people shouldn't be told to wear masks, but it's those person's personal responsibility to inform you and give you advice, because they're in positions where they're specialists and that's their job. Hold on a second. Wait.
You want to add anything, Dubs?
Something, right?
Yeah.
So
I have a brain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not a fan of idealism, because it's fantasy. Right. Yeah, it's fantasy. It's all subjunctive case. It's all wishful thinking.
I don't like a lot of it, because you end up in a situation where it's like how it only applies to you in your best possible world or your best life. And the thing is when you live your best life and ignore the fact that we live in a society and that we're societal creatures. One of the reasons why, like you said earlier, being shut down and this stuff is going to kill us is because we're social creatures. We need to be around other people. In fact,
I don't want to be around anybody right now, but
you're talking on something.
Yeah, it's thousands of miles away. It doesn't count.
Right.
But yeah, I agree with you, and I think Dave underestimates that societal need, because it's just not all of society is going to have this personal responsibility that he thinks that is only towards him as an individual.
Okay, so let me break that down real quick, because he is the problem that means his idealism won't work. If everybody was going to take personal responsibility and understand how they affected society, whether to or to not wear a mask, and people were going to be altruistic, because you need people to be altruistic in an ideal situation, it means that he would be wearing a mask. So it doesn't matter. Put your damn mask on and wash your hands, Dave.
I choose what food I eat, I choose when I exercise, and I choose when I wear a mask. Oh, and while we're talking about that, why do we have to wear a mask over our nose? Why do we have to do that? We're not spitting out our nose.
Okay, nurse, take this away.
Okay, there is such a thing as basic anatomy and understanding basic airflow here. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but how do you breathe if you're not breathing through your mouth? General consensus for everybody. Let me see. You breathe out your nose, right? General air direction. When you inhale, it is going into your system. When you exhale, it is coming out of your system, whether it's through your mouth or your nose.
I am a little stunned because by the way, I hadn't seen this video, but I know he argued this before. This was I do know he's argued this before. I've seen it on Twitter. Okay, and I'm just going to be real basic here, like you. If the nose is connected to the pathway for the airway through your lungs, because it goes up to the mouth and it has, goes with the sinuses in the nose. If you can expel viruses through the mouth, you could expel them through the nose as well.
You guys think David
It's the
Silverman
same
has ever
pathway.
seen-
It's two holes to the same pathway. Where am I missing his argument here?
There is the pharynx, which connects your nasal cavity and your oral cavity. There is no blockage, there is no membrane, there is no separation in the two of them. That is also why you can only either breathe out your nose or breathe out your mouth. It's not two separate pathways.
Hey, that's why when I got a COVID test, they shoved it so far up my nose that I could taste it.
Yeah, I mean that's how they swab is through your nose. This is what when I've heard Dave mention this before, I was like, what the hell is he talking about? This is simple. I mean, maybe there's more. Maybe he explains it in a different. Let's listen.
Confirmed. David Silverman is a mouth breather who's never sneezed.
He's a mouth breather. All right, maybe like I said, let's see. Maybe he gets better on this because I don't get that.
I'm just giving you a really hard time because it's fun.
Let's see what he says here.
Blowing snot out our nose when we're talking. You're not catching anything because we have other people say it's for our own safety. Well,
when you exhale, some of it comes out your nose still.
Period. Yes. When any of us are talking, some of that is coming out your mouth and your nose.
Okay.
Yes.
As somebody who has taken fluid dynamics, okay, air is a fluid. And when you have different pipes, and any nurse would have to learn things like Reynolds numbers and laminar flow, and they know all about this shit. So she knows exactly what I'm saying here. If you have two pathways where you have one larger diameter, one smaller diameter, you have a higher volumetric flow through one, but you still have volumetric flow through the other. It's going to be less restrictive. It's going to have a high kinetic energy, but you have still flow through it. You cannot prevent that. If I have two pipes and I have airflow through one, and they're not isolated from each other, I have to have airflow through the others. When I expel through my mouth, some of it comes out my nose. It has to.
Yes.
Am I incorrect on that? It's a little bit less because of high potential energy, but
I would love to have him just watch the cartoon version of Osmosis Jones and understand the dynamics of bodily functions.
Do you think
I think you should. I think
David has never had a cold or he's never had the flu, so he has completely no, because you get sick and your nose gets stuffy and then you have to spit it out your mouth.
Or sneezing.
It's just basic fluid theory. It's not even complicated. Well, fluid theory can get really complicated, but basic fluid theory is not.
Do you think when you snort cocaine, it goes into your system, it goes through your lungs?
This is taking a turn. All right, let's continue.
I can't say for sure that I know the exact process of it myself, but yes.
Me alone.
I'm just saying, there's a lot of things that people do where they shove things up their nose. There are people who do tricks where they'll put a snake that goes up their nose and it sticks out their mouth or whatever because they're just saying.
Right? If it's for my safety, I got it. I'm good. Okay. If
it's for your safety, you should probably educate yourself better on the way your nose works.
Yeah, this is a really bad argument. I don't. Again, this throws me for a loop here, but we got to make it through here. Come on.
I like courtesy. I like common courtesy. I understand that not everybody has done the research that I've done, but
the research that he's done. Dave, no offense, this is not research. None of us do research. We look into things and we read. I do a lot of reading. You know that, Dave. I don't like using the word research because there are actual researchers out there, and that's a hell of a lot more in depth than what I do by doing Google searches and go reading some papers. At least I read some papers. Maybe you might want to call that researching, but it's not research, if that makes sense. I don't use the term that way. You know?
Honestly, Googling how many COVID deaths there were
Not
is
research.
not research. But I would also like to point out, you were clearly not being that thorough since you didn't, all you said was, oh, well, why do I have to cover my nose? Why does that matter? You didn't actually look at any of the answers, because there are answers. Obvious ones. And you also, I don't think, noticed that you went from 2019 to 2020, and no, I'm not letting that go.
For my safety. It's kind of bullshit. I think masks should always be worn under the nose because you're not spitting and you're not blowing your nose. I also talk about, and this is such, there's so much bullshit information going out here. People are talking about the hospitals being overwhelmed. Let me show you this.
There's so much bullshit information going on here.
Just said. Hospitalization projections are very scary. We're already at 87% ICU capacity in Washington. That's really scary, right? That makes it sound bad, right? Right. And then they link to this great little chart. Look at this. It's a live chart. It shows you how overwhelmed your local hospitals are. It's from the NPR. Look at Florida. Look at Washington.
Okay, there's a thing called per capita and population density. But when you have an ICU that's operating 100% capacity, that literally means, correct me if I'm wrong, that there are no beds available.
Yes. So I think the difference that he's not understanding here is there is a huge difference between unit, say ICU, medicine, whatever, capita and bed management versus entire hospital management. And so he's missing the point that, yes, 80% of the ICU beds are being taken up because that's primarily where we're sending majority of our COVID patients. So say your ICU is a 16-bed unit and you have 13 or 14 beds that are being used for COVID patients. We are also trying to function at a normal level on top of COVID. So you only have how many beds left for the people who are coming in for car accidents.
Other things, yeah, the other need the beds, yeah.
Or things like that. But when you look at in terms of a whole hospital, my ICU and my critical care unit can be at capacity, but I may have units that are not, And it has to look at your supply and your experience and your ability to adapt. So yes, say in perspective, my ICU is 16 beds. All of those beds are full. They're not going to start sending COVID patients to a transplant unit. For one, people aren't educated enough to treat these people, or we have not been trained to treat these people. Two, then you would have to shut down an entire separate operation that, now you're treating the COVID patients, but you're allowing your pre-transplant or some of your post-complicated transplant people to be put out.
And
so
also potential exposure, correct?
A hospital cannot, essentially, what you're saying is a hospital can't stop its regular functions.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of this, they have to.
Okay, so before COVID, what was your average capacity? If you had 16 beds, what were they normally at for an average day? Because they obviously weren't all filled, were they?
Well, and that's the thing is that you got to look at each hospital and you got to look at the region. Some of the bigger hospitals, sometimes we're at 106% capacity.
Okay, that's fine on the big medical things because there's other people that are sick with other things.
There are a lot of people who are sick. What we're seeing right now is that we're not over census with a lot of our beds because, they've slowed down surgeries. There's people who are not coming into hospital who have minor conditions that are otherwise treatable, whereas before, I think we took a lot of things for granted, and a lot of people, we were seeing an influx of people come through our emergency rooms. But now you have to look at the pros and the cons of it is, okay, I have a very high-grade fever. Typically, a lot of people think they're very, very sick. They're going to the hospital. They're being treated with fluids. They're sent home. Those same people now have access to telephone, virtual conversations with doctors who can direct them to proper treatment without having to come into hospital.
I think that might be one of the greatest things that have come out of this is virtual medicine. I don't know why they haven't done that from a long time ago. I remember when last time I had to go to the hospital, I had called, the nurse, to give her my things, and as it progresses, she said she's like, I have to recommend that you actually go to the hospital at this point. And I got a recommendation to go to the hospital. But it's done, over telephone. that should be over Zoom kind of nowadays,
There's definitely certain regions that are ahead of where we are at this point and do have things like that. But because those people are not coming through, we have an influx of COVID patients coming through as well, right? So we're kind of displacing the amount of people with different diagnoses.
I think there's also something you need to take into consideration, or two things. One is the difference between America and Canada, right? So America has a whole nother issue where if you don't, like in Canada, if you don't have a family doctor and there isn't a walk-in clinic near you, if you just need antibiotics because you think you have like strep throat, you go to the hospital and they'll treat you.
They'll treat you, and then they generally have a physician who will follow you as well until your primary issue is resolved.
So in Canada, you can do things like that, and the hospitals are set up to be able to do things like that. But in America, that's not the case. In America, you've got not only privatized healthcare, but you've also got a whole lot of people who were worried that they got COVID and didn't go. That was a whole big thing. Remember when this started, there were stories and people talking about how they were afraid to go, they couldn't go, they were being encouraged not to go, they were told that they should go, and because they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
So you've got a whole other issue that comes out of
and
this
people are afraid to go because the ones that didn't have it are afraid to go to the hospital thinking they might catch it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's obviously a higher potential. Yeah.
So he's talking about these numbers with and he's completely like, oh, well, these numbers aren't very high, or these numbers are low, or these numbers aren't making sense to me. And it's like, yeah, because you're not taking into consideration like the 1,700 different factors going on about whether or not people even feel like they can go to the hospital in the first place. Kawasa Revised said, I think Dave has just fully went beyond the event horizon for the contrarian black hole. He's just like this on every topic these days.
I know, and I agree with Kawasa on it. Dave is a firebrand. He tends to like be a contrarian and throw grenades out there and wants to like push the envelope. I've noticed about Dave.
14%, King County.
That's why none of us think he's malicious in this. If we thought he was being malicious, then I think we would be approaching this in a whole different.
No, I don't think it's malicious, but this is one of those things where people could have ramifications. I don't think anybody's listening to David Silverman and going, "Hey, look, I'm not going to wear my mask," and I don't think he's having an actual impact as far as people like not wearing. So it's but if it was like Dr. Fiduci or Trump saying these things, there would be a problem.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's a difference between when you're pushing conspiracy theories, or again, he approached this from a far more positive, I think, approach than somebody who's like a flat earther trying to convince people that the Earth is flat. I don't think David is necessarily trying to convince.
No, I don't think he is either.
I think he's just trying to have the conversation.
Yeah, fair enough.
Not 89.
The nose thing was
22%. We are not in a hospital crisis, ladies and gentlemen. 29%.
Okay, that I do take umbrage with. We have a nurse here. Would you say that we are in a hospital crisis?
I would say it's dependent on the region for sure. So
absolutely, yeah. Region dependent.
Yeah, those who were hit by COVID much larger
are
definitely more crisis. Yeah, look at New York. They were hit hard and they were hit at a large capacity. And unfortunately, as a COVID patient, it's not just an in and out visit. Sometimes you have those long-term stays. And the more people with the exponential growth of those being admitted, yes, we're at a crisis. We don't have enough beds to fit the amount of people that we're trying to treat. And as a hospital, you can't, I'm not sure entirely, and I'm not going to speak on the States, but in most Canadian systems, we can't just turn away people just because we don't have the bed spacing for them.
Right.
We find sources and we find things that we can do to help these individuals, whether it be we transport them to other hospitals who are not in crisis, or we, start opening up specific floors like some of us have, turning some of our units that are not being as bombarded into COVID-specific units at this time.
And by the way, yeah, Dr. How do you pronounce his name?
Fauci.
Yeah, Dr. Fauci. That's what I was saying. But as somebody had mentioned, like Dr. Cross mentions, like LA reopening and nobody's wearing a mask because their collective IQ is apparently less than 20. It goes again to what I had mentioned earlier about conceit. I lived in LA. I know the area well. I was born in Hollywood. Okay, I grew up near Van Nuys and Beverly Hills and that whole area. That is a very conceited area. LA is full of conceited people. Let me tell you, they are fucking conceited. There's all about me, entitlement. That's my subjective opinion, but that is something that I've known all my life. Orange County is just as bad, by the way. Orange County is just as bad.
Population density of those.
But I don't think they want to wear masks for that reason. I do think that a lot of it is personal arrogance and conceit. I'm convinced of this.
I would entirely agree with that as well.
I think that there's also another thing that we need to consider: the hospitals displacing people or coming up with workarounds or other systems to help assist with things like this, such as calling in or having online consultations, essentially would help ease these problems. And this is why it's like, when is the video that when is the that chart he's looking at, which is a live one, versus when the video he was looking at was? Because now I don't trust his timelines.
Yeah. Oh.
If he was looking at something that said that, oh, hey, here's a chart and this is, or here's a tweet and this person is saying that the Washington is at 80%, and he goes, well, here's a live thing and it's not at 80%, and it's like, was it when the tweet went out though?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, that's a perfect word I'm thinking of. It's vanity. Absolute vanity. That vanity is perfect. That is what my argument is I think that people in LA, and I think David, no offense, David, you are vain as hell, dude. You really are. But
my sister got some my sister got some really cool masks that have like cool paintings and stuff on them. I just have to
look, people are making money off those things, and I think that's a great idea. People that want to be stylish, they have some really stylish, really good looking masks, and they make it into a fashion statement. I have no problem with that. If you want to be vain, and
masks as well have definitely changed.
Yeah.
You know,
listen, I have more inconvenience than David Silverman does at wearing a mask, because I wear glasses.
Super chat.
JMD Apologetics 101 for $3.99 said we should do a stream together on philosophy.
Yeah, anytime, bud. It's been a while, but yeah, JMD, I would definitely do a philosophy stream with you. You got my email. Message me. Let's do it. Pick a topic. I got some things in the works for philosophy stuff, but I don't know that would be up your alley. But yeah, reach out to me. All right.
And for Yakima, 25%. Let's go down to some of the darker numbers here. California, those dark numbers. San Bernardino County, you're at 50% capacity. Okay. Kings County, California, 57% capacity. Imperial County, 67% capacity. Madera, 59% capacity. Look, I'm not saying COVID is a joke. It's not a joke. It's a disease that we should be taking seriously because it's seriously messing with us. But let's not blow this out of proportion, and let's not overreact, and let's not pretend this doesn't have a cost, okay? This has a cost. Child abuse is way up during the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
I need another beer.
Yeah, I help me wrap my head around this. So is he arguing that because of COVID-19, people are being more abusive to children because of it, because they're home more with them or something?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
that's a problem that should be dealt with COVID and not dealt with the people abusing children.
Yeah.
Because it's not directly COVID related, but because of COVID, we're seeing sometimes these spikes.
But this is a secondary thing of COVID. It's not a primary thing because of the COVID virus. It's a secondary thing because of the restrictions being put on people for isolation because of COVID. I mean, that's a secondary though. It's not a primary.
What it is
if you're going to abuse your child, you're going to do it regardless of COVID being a thing and regardless of these restrictions being a thing. It's just being more profoundly seen because these individuals are home.
Yeah,
what it is that you've got an underlying problem, and now because this other thing has happened, it has put pressure on this problem, allowing you to see that this pressure is here and that this problem is here, and so that should be dealt with as it is. Changing the restrictions around COVID does not help these children.
And that's true, and I think a lot of it is because we're more aware of things. I mean, a lot of people misunderstood back when a lot of some things had we noticed there's a dramatic increase with, but it wasn't the fact that there was a dramatic increase because anything had changed in the society. It was a matter of we had more cameras out there filming these types of things, and so it's just being recorded more, and you'd see it more.
why are there more divorces now that nowadays? And it's like, maybe because back in the 60s and 50s, women weren't allowed to, we weren't even allowed to have a bank account. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It was much more difficult back
can't
then. Yes.
Right?
I tell you, as soon as we give the woman the right to vote, it all went to hell after that, right? Who argued that? Was it Russian Viz that did that? Somebody actually argued that, and I'm like, okay, that's the hill you don't really want to die on, man.
I don't like it because I don't agree with the Wannons are smarter than I am. I don't like it.
Yeah.
As parents are not being exposed, the children are not being exposed to the teachers. So the reports are going way down, but the abuse victims in hospitals are going way up, okay? This cannot mean anything other than we have a serious abuse problem on our hands here as well. This is from the Journal of...
But it's unrelated, though. Again, that's a whole different. It's a whole different issue.
If the economy was shut down, aside from COVID, we would still see these issues happening. This is an issue that has been substantial because of the protocol being used, of COVID. It's not because of COVID itself.
Well, yeah, of course. That's what I say.
All child abuse by no one wearing masks.
But what is it? It's like Daddy couldn't go to the bar, so I'm going to beat my kid today?
Yeah.
You know? Well, you know what's funny? In California, they did consider the alcohol, these liquor stores as necessary.
Oh yeah, no, in Canada.
Yeah, they did.
I did see a story that was talking about the tragedy of marriages that are being, like far more divorces are happening because of the restrictions, and it's like, what, you had to spend time with your spouse, and you
right? It's like, oh, I got to know this person better. I don't like them really. I'm out of here.
Well, you shouldn't be viewing this as like a negative effect.
All right, we got let's see, about 6 more minutes at 1.5 speed, so about 4 minutes.
American Medical Association. I'm using good stats, using good sources, okay?
2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that.
We also can't
2.5 minutes
and ignore the suicides. They're also up, but we don't know how long it's going to be because suicides are going to be economically related. So when we destroy jobs, when we destroy
3 minutes, 3 minutes left.
The suicides are going to last off into the distance. Those repercussions are going to be long-standing, and those are shutdown deaths.
You know what?
And those kids being abused are shutdown related.
Hey, so suicides that are affected by people not being able to take care of themselves because they don't have a job, you know what would probably solve that problem instead of saying people should wear masks? Universal income.
The UBI? Well, they weren't thinking about doing a UBI, but they were talking about having a stipend every month, right? Instead of having these $600 checks, $1,200 check, they would have a stipend every month through the crisis. But
I don't think anybody is pro shutdown. I don't think anybody wants things to be shut down for any indefinite amount of time. But I do think people are saying, like, listen, nobody wants things shut down, but it's beneficial for us to do it for a short-term period, so that way we can get things under control.
Yeah,
nobody's saying shut down because I don't want to go to work.
I have no problem with, for one, they obviously they get put money in the economy, right? It's to stimulate the economy, and I get that. But also, we all pay taxes, right? We all pay taxes, unless you're Ken Hovind or Kyle accusing me of tax fraud, But most of us, we actually really do pay taxes. So if there's something like this where we're going to get some money to sustain us, if people have not being able to work or something like that, that's well, who cares? I mean, the people are stigmatized by that term social. Socialized medicine, socialism. They're stigmatized by it. It's like a dirty word or something. It's weird. Yeah, well,
people in America.
But I mean, we pay. You pay, for example, you pay for unemployed. When you have work, you have money that you're paying for this stuff. So when you get unemployment, you have unemployment. You pay into retirement things, right? When you retire at 62 and a half or 65 years of age, all these things are basically your money. For the most part, right? You've given the government money. You want to have something from it, right? And what's wrong with giving the money from taxes and it be used for one, socialized roads? That's all socialized.
It's a weird double standard, right? Because people want things to be reopened that are non-essential, right? So, but they don't want, with non-essential stuff closed, they still don't want to give people money to help sustain themselves because, they might spend it on something fallacious. They can't spend it on anything fallacious. Everything is closed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everybody should get a care package from the government, right? Just get include like a bubble bath, a joint, a bottle of whiskey, and a high definition porn movie. That's just, that's just, there you go. That's the care package that the government gives out. So
I don't think
spend your time.
That people who should be making a living wage, who aren't making a living wage, are like, well, they don't need to. They can just survive off the bare bones minimum. It's like, yeah, they could, but you know what they're not doing?
Well,
stimulating the economy.
They can actually. Do you remember, and this is a sidetrack and we got to get going, but do you remember when McDonald's just, made a list? I think it was McDonald's. They said, okay, well, this is, the minimum, and this is what, and they didn't have things like, like electricity.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, no, this is not an accurate list,
And that list also included as if they were also working another job full time.
Yeah, it was bizarre. All right, let's see here.
They are to be considered the negative side, the cost of the shutdown, all right? When we shut down, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. We shut down our quality of life, we lower our quality of life, but more importantly for this discussion,
some people think the quality of life has gone up.
We shut down convenience is the issue there.
Suicide. So, I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet, my little spreadsheet.
More conflating. All of the things he just mentioned were conflating one issue with another.
Canceled holidays for 0.73%. That's this number. 0.073. That's 7.3 1/100% less whatever is killing the young people. That's not COVID. Less those times when the comorbidities were going to kill those people anyways. Less the suicide that's coming up as a cost of the shutdowns. Less the cost of all the children getting abused and the long-term repercussions thereof.
All right. So what I'm trying to understand his argument. He's saying, look, if we don't shut it down, we're going to have a rise in the death toll because of COVID. If we do shut it down, we're going to have all these other problems like people committing suicide, higher children, things. And so he's trying to equate them with each other as like some kind of like zero-sum game.
The number of people dying will be the same whether we shut it down or not, because we're going to lose people for these other reasons due to the shutdown.
Yeah.
And how about instead we shut it down and fix these other problems?
That's what I would argue. Yes.
Is that too idealistic for the person who's running off of this ideology that everybody should just be responsible for their own health and, interacting with another person has absolutely nothing to do with their health at all?
Maybe if we do the shutdowns and stuff like that, and we also invest in things like, suicide hotline prevention things, people and places people can go to get mental health services, things of that nature. Wouldn't that kind of fix that, or not fix at least, but at least help alleviate that one problem? I mean, again, it's not some zero-sum game. It's not like, okay, we're going to weigh doing this against this. You do this, and then as these other things come up, you fix those problems as they come up, because there are ways of helping those problems. I mean, in America, our mental health system is bullshit.
His argument is the economy.
Which, I mean, if we had a proper shutdown to begin with, we might be ahead of these problems already.
Yes. Well, yeah, but that should have been in mid and 2019.
It's a little late now.
Yeah. That we missed the boat on that one. That rooster has already left the hen house and just running. That, I mean, it's done,
That ship has wrecked.
Average death per year, 0.87%. We're talking 7.3 1/100%. Now, to put that into perspective, let's look at these other numbers here. Again, let's compare the 240 to heart disease, 655. Let's compare the 240 to cancer, 599. So there's two bigger killers, and they're both twice as big as COVID.
But that is irrelevant.
No. Don't forget, he's looking at the 2019 numbers, not the spike numbers.
But even still, it's just, I don't understand the argument here, because those numbers are going to happen. If we didn't have these types of precautions, our numbers for COVID would be astronomically higher than these numbers here.
And also, those numbers are not, I don't think you could properly have if he's gonna nitpick the COVID numbers, I can nitpick these numbers just as much. And I would love to know how he got these numbers properly and actually with like a regimen.
Well, and as far as I know, things like heart disease don't have a vector. They're not transmittable, right? I mean, so I'm a lot more concerned with things that are affecting other people than I am with somebody who has a heart disease, because nobody's, as far as I know, again, I'm not a doctor, but you can't catch heart disease from somebody.
Heart diseases were transmitted through air.
Yeah.
So it's comparing to me. Am I wrong that it's comparing apples and oranges here?
Yes, to some extent he is, for sure. I mean, in terms of your specific example of heart disease, I mean, it depends. There's so many variations of heart disease, and it all comes down to, did it start as, you know, a bacterial?
Oh, sure. Oh, but that's the vector for the bacterial thing, right? So it's not
Exactly.
Yeah. So
You have this problem where you've got him bringing up all of these problems and then conflating them into COVID without realizing that they were problems anyway. There's just more pressure on them because of COVID restrictions. So all that does is shine light on these problems that already existed. You can't say, "Oh, the economy went to shit because of COVID." No, the economy was already shit, and it got worse.
And let me ask, because I do got to make it through this video. We got to wrap this up really soon. With all the funding that's in the COVID, is that taking away money that's going through researching, like cancer research and all these other diseases research? Is that affecting that at all, or is it still pretty much the same?
And that's the thing, is you look at the people who have, you know, concerns about the COVID vaccine and how quickly it was produced. But what a lot of people don't understand is we took every single resource that we have. You know, we delegated different aspects of these research teams and these microbiologists and infectious disease personnel, and we've grouped them into one focus group. So yes, we're no longer necessarily looking at a variation of health diseases because we're trying to focus on the number one issue right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we have taken away from, you know, cancer research. We have taken away from, you know, different health issues to try and focus on this one thing that has caused such a global issue.
I know you're not you're not an economist or anything, but if the 1%, so to speak, the people that are worth $1 billion like that, if they gave a substantial amount of money to fix a problem, like I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard it's around 20 million to at least resolve homelessness for a little while.
Yes.
But and I think that's probably pretty accurate. But if they did invest, you know, $1 billion for COVID, $1 billion for cancer research, you know, or at least several hundred million. Would that not have a substantial effect on morbidity rates?
Oh, yes, entirely. Entirely. You have to look at the financials of everything. And, you know, I've got my own opinions when it comes to cancer research and, you know, how things have erupted from that. But if you had these multi-million, these billionaires, you know, investing in certain aspects of healthcare, we would definitely be exponentially better than where we're at currently.
I agree. And
I think there's something to be said for whether or not, because somebody really in the chat made a decent point about sunscreen. So they're like, don't wear sunblock and watch the amount of cancer cases skyrocket. Now imagine if that skin cancer was transmittable to people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Wear sunblock. That's the same thing with the masks. Wear the damn mask.
Yeah, hey, a perfect example. I used to work around a lot of radiation. I was a radiological control point quote engineer. That's what they were called, but it's not a real engineer. Sorry, a godless engineer. But that you work around a lot of radiation. You have to take certain precautions, right? You have to know what kind of radiation you're working around, what prevents it from penetrating, you know, what kind of material, how long your exposure is, this personal thing. You know, don't stand in a puddle of a spill of primary coolant. You know, there's certain things you just don't do, right? But you can't catch radiation from somebody. Right. I mean, you have your own exposure. Once you've been exposed and the biological damage is done to the water in your cells, and it starts disassociating. So you have hydroxyl and hydronium, and it starts having free radicals, and your DNA starts having what's called primitive dimers, and you start getting lesions. You get cancer, and you die. You're not going to transmit that to anybody. But what happens if you did? What happens if you did?
Yeah, exactly.
As secondhand smoke. Look at all the policies and the regulations that came into place within even the last decade in terms of cigarette smoking. You know, you can't do it in public places. You can't do it in enclosed spaces. There's certain, you know, areas where you can't smoke at all. And that has just become common courtesy. You can smoke in your vehicle. It's like,
it's even up to, like, what is it, 2 feet from a building, from a public entrance and exit, I think
it's even it's 2 meters. I think it's even more than that.
It is, yeah. Yep.
Well, we're almost done here.
And nobody does anything. But it's not just twice as big as COVID. It's twice as big as COVID gross, less the suicides and the child abuse.
Nobody's doing anything about suicide, guys.
This is not the reality.
What about the
This is not.
children?
What about the children?
1.7%. That's one thing. But now we're talking 7.3 100ths% max. Less young fatalities. Yes, less whatever's killing the young people. Less the comorbidities that would have taken those people anyways.
Oh, so did you
less
catch
the
that?
suicide growth.
Pause that. Less the young people morbidity. He's taking out that giant spike from when everybody went to March break and summer vacation from 2020.
Yeah, and all the colleges were partying on campus, and yeah.
Yeah, he just casually just took out like a huge number of people. Because remember, he looked at that chart and was like, "Well, I don't know what this spike is from, but it's not COVID."
How many people actually had COVID parties, thinking, "Oh, let's get COVID,"
God.
like it was like chickenpox parties. Remember that kind of stuff? It's
No,
like,
it's
no, that's not a good idea.
That's the child abuse. We have to open up our economy. We have to be done with this. We have to understand that the disease is
Open up
as
the
deadly as it
economy
can
to
be,
protect the
and that
children.
those of us who are susceptible and vulnerable, those can be substantially well isolated. Let's put some pots together. Let's put some funds together so that Amazon doesn't charge them a delivery fee for their food. Lock them away safe and sound, and let us open our country again.
Amazon's
Sounds so picture perfect, right? Yeah, just lock them away. All the people at risk, fuck them. They let them stay at home. They don't have to go anywhere. But me, I'm healthy and I'm young. I let me go where the hell I want. It's again,
It could be asymptomatic. I don't know, but that's my risk to take. So does that mean that David Silverman is going to go out and go around if he was going to be responsible for paying for the fees of somebody who got sick because he was walking around?
Who knows, right? Yeah.
Could he get sued? Is he going to have to pay for the funeral charges or the hospital charges for somebody who had to go to the hospital? Would he be willing to take on that risk? Because if he's going to actually say, I'm responsible and I'm going to take on that risk, that financial risk should be involved in that.
Maybe there should be COVID insurance, right? Not for you, but it's just like liability insurance for a car. If you give somebody COVID, you can be sued or the insurance company pays out.
In his ideal world, it's a situation where he's responsible, which means he has to take on all of the responsibility of getting someone else sick.
You would have no choice. It would be an ethical thing at that point, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So is he going to do that?
Probably not.
This is how we maximize life here, okay? That way the suicide growth doesn't go up.
No, it's not.
The child abuse doesn't go up, and the people who are going to be affected by this are going to be the safest. That's how we should be doing
Hold up. There's the thing here. The places that are opened right now are places where the 20 to 40-year-olds are working. The 20 to 40-year-olds are the parents of these children that he's talking about. So you're going to say, hey, all of you 20 to 40-year-olds, you need to go to work and go back to work because we need to help the economy for the sake, because you might beat your child. But we're going to ignore that you're going to give your child COVID because we're exposing you a shitload more because nobody's required to wear a mask.
It won't kill our country anymore. That's my wisdom for the day. Oh, one more thing. Like and subscribe and click the bell if you like what I said.
Go like,
tell everybody, spread this around. Give me the comments in the section. I'll be there watching. Maybe I'm full of shit. I know this is going to be explosive, but I think that we have to have personal responsibility here. I think the people who are sick should want this. I think the people who are sickly should not want to shut down our economy for them. I think they should say what I would say, which is, you guys do your shit. I'll be here quarantining because that's my personal responsibility. What the hell is wrong with this world? Anyways, like, subscribe, share, and comment. And I sell insurance. If you want insurance, put your email down in the comments section.
Yeah, he sells insurance. I didn't know that.
And thanks to Emery and Steve and David. I challenge you all to respond.
Which are we doing right now, Dave?
And good old-fashioned discord.
I feel challenged.
Appreciate the shout out there, bud. Well, it had 568 views.
I see how it is. I don't count.
I don't know if I want to like it or dislike. I'm not going to dislike his video, but I'm not sure I can actually like it, Dave. I don't know. These are I'm not going to go through all these comments, but most of them, it appears, seem to be kind of agreeing with him. And I don't think he deletes comments, so I think there's organic.
No, I think that there is something to be said for personal responsibility. I agree. I think being negligent and putting yourself at risk is silly, which is what David is proposing, though. In his ideal, people would be educated enough, they would know enough about the virus, and also we would have enough time to understand what the long-term effects of the virus are, and people would be able to understand and be able to read these statistics. But because we're not able to, people like David Silverman make decisions that David Silverman is making. And his decision is like, I'm not going to wear a mask. But in an ideal world, everybody would be choosing to wear that mask. So his argument is, easily just flipped around the other way.
And my thing is, in turns, if he's deciding these for himself and he gets COVID, he better not turn around and, blame it on the system, blame it on everybody else, blame it on other people not taking their own personal responsibility towards this. And he better take accountability for his actions.
Yeah. All right, so I think we got to wrap it up here. We're like 2.5 hours, so.
Yeah, he's got to take, if he's honestly going to take personal responsibility for everything, and he wants that to be a personal responsibility thing, he better start building up a system that lets you track COVID, track exactly who gave it to you, and how exactly the legal process is going to be for you paying for either that person's funeral or all of that person's medical costs for getting that thing.
Yeah, I'll just leave it as I think Dave is again. I think he's just he wants to have the dialogue. I don't think he's actually making any really firm arguments, but I think he's being idealistic. And I think that because of that, if people did take into consideration what he said and decided to go with it, I think it would actually cause harm. And that's my only real criticism.
I saw two things that were bullshit that I didn't like. One, the jump from complaining about 2019 numbers and then going to 2020. If you're going to talk about 2019, talk about 2019, before all the PPE stuff was in. And all the regulations were in. If you're going to talk about 2019, talk about 2019. If you're going to talk about 2020, talk about 2020. And if you're going to talk about both of them, make sure you separate it and make it clear about what you're referring to, because you use the 2019 numbers and then you use the 2020 numbers and then you just disregarded it. You disregarded all of these younger people getting sick saying, well, I don't know what caused it, but it sure wasn't COVID, so I'm going to ignore it.
Yeah.
No, you didn't know that. You didn't know what caused it. So either you didn't know and it could have been COVID, or it wasn't COVID and you can demonstrate that, which you can't do because it was COVID.
All right, Nurse Dubs.
Wow.
You got promotion. I hope we got through most of your notes. I hope that you were able to use your notes in this. I know it's kind of fast paced with the video, but that was actually 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours. What else do you want to add to this? What's your summary?
Well. I mean, I could talk about this for days. I could talk about the entire healthcare system forever, but I think taking some points away from this is, yes, we have to look at the society as a bigger picture, whether we want to personally or not. This is something that is affecting everybody at every level. It is not something that is just, individual responsibility. And I think that going forward, that hopefully, we can get a grasp and an understanding of this virus. And 50, 60 years from now, we look at it similar to how we look at the flu right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's about right, and I think that it's going to be well past my lifetime before they really get a handle on all that, and it gets to the point where it's not as virulent, it doesn't have as high as an infection rate, but eventually, like I said, I am convinced that viruses don't want to. And I use the word want, obviously, not anthropomorphically. But, I mean, viruses don't tend to want to kill their host because then they don't spread. I mean, so it's not beneficial for a virus to go into a host, kill the host, and then it doesn't have any transmission. It doesn't replicate. It's not a survival thing for that virus. So
I think this is a really good example on information, what information you take in versus what information you're going to output. Mm-hmm. So coming from an American standpoint, coming from the information that is being allotted to Americans is greatly, greatly affecting somebody who I think David Silverman means well. I do not think he's out to harm anybody. I don't think he's out to push any conspiracy theories. I think he's somebody who wants to do good. And I also think that there's a lot of information that is not going out. There's a lot of information that he just either doesn't have access to, wasn't able to find, or he was too quick on the draw, or he just wanted to have the conversation, so he thought he'd put this information out there to see what he could get back. And so
I agree, but here's the thing. I think my major criticism is this. On certain topics that you don't have an expertise on, or you don't even have a very good lay understanding, that's when you bring somebody else in. This is like we obviously did. We brought somebody in who knows a lot more about it than us. I think Dave should probably done this video with somebody.
Before we did this one?
What's that?
We postponed this.
Yeah, we literally postponed it. Yeah, because of this. Yeah. People know I don't want to put out misinformation. That's actually something I literally cringe. One of my great fears is not being wrong. I don't mind being wrong. My fear is that I put out misinformation that can be promulgated and then that gets exacerbated. I don't want that out in the universe. I don't want misinformation out there. I hate that. It literally is a pet peeve of mine. So I don't mind being wrong because I can correct it, right? I'm like, oh yeah, screwed up. Let me correct it. Now the misinformation's nullified. It's been addressed. It's no longer a threat because I think misinformation is dangerous to people. I think misinformation can harm people.
It's harming David.
And you know what?
Misinformation harming.
And for me to come on here and say that, I love to think that I am an expert, but unfortunately, with the amount of time that I've put into my career so far, I know for a fact that there are people, higher up with more experience who could definitely portray a better opinion towards this. But just personally, from my experience, from what I have, I'm trying to speak on the truth of as much information that I can give you.
Well, I'm going to give you a little pushback on that. Yeah, we could have got a virologist on. I know a few, but we're not asking for an expertise on viral transmissions and stuff like that. We're asking for an expertise that's in the trenches, that has experienced it. Your expertise is based upon your experience.
Exactly.
So
yeah, there's a difference between looking for somebody who's going to be able to be like quote unquote an expert on COVID specifically, or versus somebody who's worked in the field who has that expertise of experiencing what it's like being in a hospital during these times, and nobody else is going to be better for something like that than somebody who does the job.
Yeah, if I want to get somebody on to discuss T cells in depth, then I can find somebody. I'm sure. Trust me.
Let's confuse the world.
The furthest I go, I actually, believe it or not, I do have some biology videos. I did a couple videos on electron transport chain that I was very proud of, believe it or not. Yeah.
Just get the hell out of here.
All right, guys, let's wrap it up. Thank you guys for the super chat. Thank you, Nurse Dubs.
Hopefully I can come back sometime soon and give you my opinion on some other fun facts.
Oh, consider it done. Yeah, just find a topic. This show is dedicated to really more like critical thinking kind of stuff, right? And I think that reviewing this video is basically evaluating somebody's ability to critically do analysis of something.
It's an how-to.
It's very superficial to say the least. We're not in depth kind of going into this video, and I don't think that David even wanted that, nor do I think that he went very much in depth. I mean,
he wanted the conversation.
He wanted the conversation, right? He didn't sit there and literally go through like papers. It was just very cursory type, perfunctory type of a video, and I'm fine with that. I think that's fine. I do those kind of things, but it's about the conversation.
That's a good purpose, though, because not a lot of people necessarily know how to do research. That's not how a lot of people don't know or have the time to dedicate to learn a lot of these things. And so I think David's video is a very, very, very good example of what your average American is going to be able to find and how they're getting from point A to point B, of like where they're getting their misinformation and how they're interpreting that information and where it's going wrong.
Yeah, he represents that demographic, right?
And I think that's valuable.
Yeah. All right, guys, wrapping it up. We'll I don't know. You got anything coming up, Chesh, on your channel? I don't think I've really got anything coming up this week.
I think my channel's up and running again, so there should be a video coming out soon. It's going to be art, so I hope you guys like that.
Let me check my. Oh yeah. Well, by the way, today is the first day of Black History Month. Cool. And tomorrow's Groundhog Day. So yeah. Just throw that out.
It's
there.
always winter up here. Who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Wrapping it up. Look forward to your comments, like, and subscribe. We had 37 downvotes. Would probably be bots. They'll go away anyways. But it doesn't matter. They're interactions. I don't care. Some videos I keep them up. Some videos I don't. It all doesn't matter. Nobody cares. But interactions are interactions. So if you like or dislike, hit that because gets it out there. That, guys, we bid you adieu.
Bye.